Hello, my friends. Hello, my family. We are back. Welcome back. What's poppin', people? We are back. RBN Friday Live. And not gonna be just me today. We got some guests that will be joining us. There is a lot to discuss. I sorry I missed the last few lives. I really hope this live go well. Been having a lot of internet issues recently. But how you guys been doing, fam? I had a lot to talk about. There was a lot I was raging about, as always. Hello, my friends. Zoya is love. Zoya is life. Is in the chat. Yeah, we're gonna have Q Anthony Amene will join us in around 30 minutes, 2 p.m. Central. He will be joining us. Carlos Gallego, you guys know him, friend of the show, my brother. Carlos will join us. So this is gonna be a great conversation, especially with Q. Q is really good on foreign policy. So you guys know I love to sit down, have foreign policy conversations with my fellow Marxists and leftists. So hope you guys enjoy this one. And you guys see the title of this video. I already see some people popping off in the chat. He was always just a ruse. Bernie's nothing but of the backstabbers. Hari says Bernie sold out in all of us, and in particular Nina Turner and Tulsi Gabbard at the 2016 convention. Later on, he refused to meet with Dr. West and Nick Brana. At that point, the writing was clear on the wall. And a lot of people who actually met, like Jesse Ventura, was just telling Sabby, he talked with Bernie, and it was clear that Bernie had plans to endorse Hillary Clinton, and he always was this sheep herder of the Democratic Party, which the report that we about to get into, we about to talk about Bernie Sanders, it gives me no pleasure. If it really does not give me pleasure, but we have to hold these progressives accountable. And it's the same ideology, the reason why I go after Democrats a lot. These are the people who claim they represent us. But not only that, Bernie Sanders and the progressives, they take money from working class people. So now we got even more incentive to press them and hold them accountable and question them on their votes and their positions that make no sense. They are supporting the massive heist of the working class. And I see my brother Carlos there. Give me a thumbs up whenever you're ready to introduce you. No rush though, brother. But we have to, let me get my brother Carlos. Carlos Gallego joined us. Thank you for joining us today. Hold on, let me fix the screen. Thank you for joining us. Good talking to you again.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Where you teach again? Where you teach?
I was teaching at St. Olaf College. I'm transitioning back to Arizona at the moment, so we'll see if something happens in Arizona, the university where I used to teach. So yeah, it's time to move back to the Southwest from the Midwest.
Yeah, this is my smart academic friend, Carlos Gallego. Good to have you join us. Once again for RBN Live, we will have Q, Anthony, and Mene. He has a call-in show with Glenn Greenwald. Right, does a lot of great writing and podcasts as well. He'll be joining us in around 25 minutes or so. There's a lot to discuss. So I was discussing Bernie at first, and we all knew this was going to happen. It's not shocking. The Senate passed unanimously to approve Sweden join NATO. And I broke this down many times, and I can explain this once again. This is nothing but an escalation. This is an assault against peace. As we've seen with Ukraine, and as members of EU states, they already have security assurances against Russia or anyone else that will invade. So the only reason to do this is to prod Russia and to cross the red line. This is the same thing we just seen with Nancy Pelosi in China and Taiwan. The West, NATO, and the United States, their only role is to prod and to escalate conflict instead of advocating for peace. And just like I was saying earlier, when you got people like Joe Manchin, we have war criminals like Joe Biden, who they're very open about being corporate and corrupt and where they get their money from, opposed to people like Bernie Sanders and the squad, who openly they take their money from workers. They're taking their money from us. Joe Manchin's like, I'm gonna take my money from big oil, Wall Street, and if you vote for me, you're an idiot. Carlos, thanks for joining us. Do you want to chime in with anything before I continue my rant?
No, I just think that's an excellent point. And I think it was on Savvy's show that Jesse Ventura talked about Bernie when he asked him, and basically that was his epiphany. It's like, Bernie is not an independent. He's a Democrat that hides behind the independent movement, which I thought was a great, just an insider view, right? Like, we don't get access to those private conversations, but even Chris Hedges and other people have said the same thing about Bernie Sanders. It's like, the more time he spent, and that's the key word, I think, the more time you spend in power, the more comfortable you get with keeping and maintaining that power, and that becomes one of your priorities. And even though Bernie's out there saying the right things, his votes and what he's voting for, I think, in many ways kind of betray some of the rhetoric that he's still trying people to get behind. And like, and you have a personal story behind him. You got behind Bernie and got burned and learned the hard way what that's like.
Yeah, we all have to start somewhere. And I'll never fail for the two-party duopoly. Like, I voted for Joe Stein in 2016. I only voted for Lesser to Evil when I was very young in 2012, and I immediately saw through the game. But during my path, and everyone go through this path when they first realize that what our government has been telling us is bullshit. Like, people go through like weird libertarian phases, and they do that mostly just because they just try to find a path that is not what the establishment has sold them. And that was my mindset. I was willing to try anything. That's still kind of my strategy, is take all our shots. So at the time, especially where the position I was, where I was a green voter, and I'm like, man, at this point, I'm just trying to say F you to the establishment. I thought at that point, taking over the Democratic Party was a good strategy. And I saw it. We tried an election cycle or two. And then and I'm very scientifically minded. Like, after seeing that, I'm like, okay, this is not working. Not only is it not working, the party is shifting to the right. So the thesis failed in all its forms, because even the idea of saying, okay, we're not going to win every race, but at least we're going to shift the party to the left. That was the idea. No, it was Biden continued all Trump policies. The Democratic Party are now a party of cop lovers of the military-industrial complex. You have anything you want to add, Carlos, before I move on?
Actually, I do, Nick. I want to give you a lot of credit for actually educating some of us who are in academia, because we do get stuck in our ivory towers and we do fall. Even those of us that come from like an anti-fascist, anti-capitalist perspective, we don't have enough time to keep up with, because we're, locked in our books and have to publish and do all this kind of, there's a whole industry around academia and maintaining your job, right? You got to keep producing knowledge that is actually not trickling down to most human beings. It's just an echo chamber. It's like a cottage industry. But when I listen to RBN, and this is I think, and I'm not trying to plug you, but this is going to be a plug, the enlightening part and the refreshing part about listening to RBN and other independent news outlets is the fact that you can actually educate large amounts of people on, and you bring the receipts, right? You bring the C-SPAN old school videos of, this is why I called, Biden old, Jim Crow Joe, is because of this history. And a lot of us have forgotten that history, or we weren't checking out C-SPAN back then, or we didn't go back and do the research. So you've actually opened my eyes to the fact that I fell for a lot of this lesser of two evils bullshit. Not that I believed in duopoly. I haven't voted for decades because I don't believe in the system. And when you come from where I come from, it's like, this is all bullshit. And you see Mexico right next door, it's like, electoral politics seems to be bullshit. It seems to be about power. But one of the things that I think you opened up is the fact that, and are opening up, is that there's no, not only not a leftist progressive, there's no functional left even within the Democratic Party anymore. It's all been absorbed into this corporate fascist nation that is run by people whose names, again, I use the cartel analogy. They don't want you to know who they are. That's why they push Nancy Pelosi and people like that out there, because at the end of the day, there are people out there that are encouraging certain decisions like, yeah, Nancy, you're going to fly to Taiwan, whether you like it or not, for these other reasons, because of the chip manufacturers and all this other stuff. So connecting those dots is very difficult to do through mainstream media, and you've really done, I think, a great job of connecting those dots and keeping at it, keeping the pressure on in terms of reminding people why the duopoly doesn't work, and why, at the end of the day, it really comes down to class issues, and those class issues give rise to other kinds of isms, whether it's racism, whether it's sexism. And I've been thinking about the interesting way we talk about like transphobia and homophobia. Those are fears which fall under the category of mental health. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're isms born out of like political, economic philosophies that are meant to marginalize whatever vulnerable population is out there, because that's how capitalism works. You have to find a new enemy that is responsible for all the ills of society, everyone except the ruling class. So I just wanted to give you a big props for bringing attention to how NATO's expanded, how our most progressive politicians are complicit, and these are more and more examples of why the duopoly doesn't work. It's gone from center-right to fascist. Those are the two options on the table right now.
Yeah, well said, Carlos. This is why I had to bring my brother Carlos. I always spit him, because when I first met, I told you guys this before. He reached out to me, and I saw that he was an academic, and I was like, oh shit. I was like, I talk to anyone that I was down. Then as soon as we talked, we immediately connected just like that, because I was like, oh shit, this dude's based. Because we know how a lot of academics same thing, but Carlos is right on the money. He comes from the class trader mentality that I respect. And what I do is I just continue to hit them over and over again with facts they can't deny, with laser focus, repetition. You're not going to distract me. There's a lot of people on Twitter, a lot of smear merchants. They want to distract you. I'm like, nah, I'm not. I'm going to keep focused. I'm going to keep telling people what Jim Crow Joe is doing. I'm going to keep telling people what our government's doing. And that's what we're going to do in RBN. And I realized, like, oh shit, like, I slept on social media for a long time because I was like, I'm more boomer minded than you guys probably think I am. Like, I really didn't join Twitter until like 2018. And literally the only reason I joined was because I was trying to help Bernie win. I was on part of the campaign. And that's literally the only reason I joined. Before I was like, man, fuck Twitter, fuck YouTube, all this shit. Then I realized, like, holy crap, you can radicalize a really large amount of people really quickly through social media. I'm like, bro, I've been slipping. And that's why I continue to expand my platform on Twitter, on YouTube, and now we got people that reach out to us and tell us that we inspire them in terms of them getting to mutual aid. I want to see if I can find this video. I want to get this dude a shout out. Fuck, I don't know if I can find it. But almost every day, damn. I really do want to find it. Hold up, where is it? But anyway, there's this dude that reached out to us. Damn, I really can't find the damn link. But this dude told us he was like he never really heard of general strikes, and he was more focused on electoral politics, watched RBN, and now there's videos of him on Twitter literally organizing workers, calling for general strikes. I'm like, holy shit, this is based. So that's what we want to do. So we have fun. We talk about a lot of issues, but you gotta see what CJ doing with the RBN chapters. We really want to get saying crack. Actually, I gotta find out. Here it is. I found it. Here it is. This is. I'm gonna get shout out to this guy, and also hopefully I can inspire some of you guys as well, because yeah, we have fun on here. But I got the Kansas City RBN mutual aid group that started up here. CJ's killing the game in California. You guys know what Rome do. Let me fix the audio here. But this is the kind of work that I want to see you guys get into. Then we get back into Bernie Sanders. This guy Marlon, he said, hey Rome, just dropping a message to let you know that because of you and Revolutionary Blackout, I joined my local cop watch where I deliver police intervention training. I'm cooking and supplying hygiene products at mutual aid event next week. We'll be volunteering at food banks in a few weeks too. Additionally, I've spoken at several protests, and I called for a general strike. I didn't even know what a general strike was until the RBN summit. So thanks for educating, inspiring me to take action. And now this is a video of him getting speech. Let me mute my mic just so you guys can hear him speak. Okay, let me show you guys this.
Sign and share petitions, protest and march, and if they do ban the right to protest, find the strength to come out on the streets and continue to protest, even if that means civil disobedience, or we call for a nationwide general strike.
People here now,
All working class and marginalised groups have to come together if our demands are met, and we have to call for a nationwide general strike. Sign petitions, march, and continue to protest. And if they do ban the right to protest, find the courage to come back on the streets and continue to protest, even if that means increased use of civil disobedience, or be called for a nationwide general strike. The time for being polite and passive is over. The time for being angry and aggressive is now.
So big shout out to that guy. And
That's great. That's really inspiring because in a lot of ways, what you're doing here is I know Rome likes to call it like propaganda, but at the end of the day, I don't call it propaganda. I think you're really educating people to how to find different resources of information, and that's fantastic. The fact that you inspired someone to go out there and promote a general strike when they didn't even know what that was, that's huge, Nick. That's solidarity across so many class lines, so many borders, so many barriers that are supposed to keep us apart. This is what they don't want us doing and talking about.
And then I still remember those people that were saying, why are you guys having a general strike summit?
They mocked you guys, right? They mocked you. They made fun of you, yeah.
And you guys see how the boutique left, where their idea of leftism is this club where the highly educated just talk among each other, right? They know all the technical terms, but what we're doing, we're trying to educate and organize the working class. We got a laser vision, our laser focus on people that may not be highly educated and may not know all these technical terms, or not incrementalists. So that's I want to share this as a moment of motivation. I like to do this to start a lot of my shows now because what we're going to talk about next is depressing. Bernie is depressing, right? So at least let's do something uplifting to start off with, right? So get involved in your community, and that's why I do this, even if it's to motivate 1 or 2, 3 people to do this. So big shout out to Marlon. Much love, much appreciation. And one thing I want to say before we continue on to Bernie Sanders, notice that every single person that was listening to this person speak, whenever he said general strike, they cheered, right? There's the energy where people want this radical change. Whenever he called for a general strike, there wasn't people in the audience like, hold on, wait a minute. What about our mechanism of then getting this done? Do we have the right? Are you going through the right channels? Right? We got to advocate caution. There wasn't people calling for incrementalism there. They like, yeah, let's do this. Let's call for change. So I think people are ready for that. So with that said, let's get into something that is more depressing because I don't want to do this. I mean, I would love not to do this, right? And there are people that ask me all the time, like, Nick, why you always gotta call out the progress? Why you always calling out AOC? Why you calling out the Democrat Party all the time? Like, people don't even, I'm at the point right now where people don't even they don't even challenge what I say. They just ask why I'm saying it. They're like, why are you calling out our ruling class? How dare you call out the people who lie and cheat us, right? So I would love in a reality where I can report, hey, yo, Bernie Sanders stood up to the military-industrial complex machine. I would love to do a segment where Bernie Sanders is calling out the fact that we don't got money for kids with baby formula, but we got money to send to Ukraine. You know who I did that segment for? I did it for Lula in Brazil because I had to look to Brazil to find a leftist leader that is willing to call out the corrupt Biden administration. Meanwhile, we in our left, we have Bernie Sanders that is unapologetically funding the Ukraine proxy war, which is a giant heist of the American working class. So all Bernie can do is simply not do that. And I wouldn't have to do this video. For all the people who love Bernie, who always ask why I gotta go after him, because he is tricking working class people. If you donate to Joe Manchin, if you look at his files, like the percentage of working class people donate to Joe Manchin, what do you think of this, Carlos? Like 1 to 5% of his money. He's open. He's taking this shit for corporations. Mitch McConnell open. He's like, bro, I am paid by corporations, you idiots. But Bernie Sanders, he's like, chip in, give me $13 and we can fight for progressive policies. Meanwhile, he endorsing, and we're going to get to this soon, he endorsing a candidate in Missouri that's not even for Medicare for all.
And one thing I do want to say, Nick, in terms of, because I get this a lot too, is the fact that it's like, why do you keep picking on these people? Why do you keep reminding us of the bad news? Why can't you focus on positive things? And I think there's something really important to say about that. I don't see you as a political cynic at all or a nihilist. I actually think that you and RBN are what I would describe as utopic minded thinkers. And I don't mean that in a naive sense. I mean that in the sense of you're always imagining a better alternative to whatever exists in the present. And that's a very hardcore Marxist philosophy in the sense of if you think you've arrived, you're going to encounter so many problems because you never are supposed to arrive. You're always supposed to seek that next level of improvement. There's always something to improve upon, socially speaking. So the fact that you're pushing back and get this resistance, that is the general ideological denial that people find comfortable because they don't want to look at the bad things. Because suddenly if they start, like some of these people that you have, whose eyes you've opened, they start to realize that the problem is systemic. It's not this year we need to vote 2 more senators or what have you. They realize that the whole system, and sometimes for some people that is so traumatic intellectually, mentally, ideologically, that they rather just close their eyes to the fact that's proven to them every year and just keep pretending that maybe if we give the system one more opportunity, it'll work. And what you're highlighting is that the fact that it doesn't, and if we let Bernie off the hook, then people are going to think we've arrived at that place where now we have a real democracy that's working for the real working class, and we're going to find ourselves right back in the pre-2016 mindset of like, hey, it's okay so long as we have a democratic president, and we're realizing that that shit doesn't work. So I just want to speak against this idea that if you're critical, you're suddenly like not in favor of humanity's success moving forward as a civilization or as a species. It's like, no, that's not true, which is I think why the word scientific is so important. Is you take a scientific perspective on this stuff, analyze the problem, where can we improve, and you target that and you move forward with a specific vision in mind, ours being, working class solidarity and healthcare for all, education for everybody, and doing those basics, not based on wealth disparities and things of this nature. So just wanted to say that against people who are critical. That's bullshit. They're just in denial and they're overwhelmed with the reality.
I think the biggest nihilists are the people with the belief that, we can't criticize Bernie and AOC because they're the best we have. What can we do? What can we do? They're the best we have. We just got to vote every 2 years and pray. It doesn't that seem more defeatist? I am highlighting the failures of progressives who take working class people money so I can pull people away from undisciplined thinking. So we can start building a real movement. It's an ideal rooted in optimism. The idea that we can do better than what these people are offering, right? And then people who don't have that revolutionary optimism, they see what I'm doing, they find it very scary. Like people are like, what? Then what? If Bernie Sanders is an imperialist, like you say, then what? Then you guys have to listen to us.
And you're unrealistic. You want unrealistic things, even though you can look at other parts of the world as like, how come they're achieving what you consider to be unrealistic in the supposedly most powerful nation on the planet?
So let me give some context. I think most of you guys know what I'm talking about. But we saw all the progressives voted to expand NATO. The only people in the House that voted against it was the villains, right? The people who are the approved rotating villain, like the Matt Gaetz, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, the Lauren, like these people are clowns, like Lauren Boebert. Like I see these people all the time. They're clowns. But their trick is to allow the villains to be right on the issues of imperialism. So then they can point to people like Bernie and AOC, like, look at the good guys. Even the good guys are for voting for NATO. Because I explained many times when I broke this down, approving NATO membership for Sweden and Finland is completely counterproductive in pursuing peace. Because the only thing that is Russia's red line was the expansion of NATO. So the only thing that would draw Putin's and Russia ire for Sweden and Finland is the expansion of NATO. They did this under they was explaining to people that Russia wanted to take over Europe. Like, it was a complete lie, and that's what they were selling in Finland. If we don't join NATO, we are defenseless to this Russian horde that's about to invade Europe. This ignores the fact that NATO, that they already get security assurances as an EU state. You think if Russia invaded Sweden and Finland before this, that the West would just sit idly by? Look at Ukraine. These countries are de facto NATO. Because if Russia or any country get involved, they will get involved as well. Russia just accused, and they accurately doing so, in my opinion, the United States of being involved in the Ukraine war. This is breaking. This is something that I want to report on yesterday. So the countries are already getting de facto protection from the West. So the only reason they did this was because Russia said the nuclear options on the table, that they want to escalate war if NATO continues to expand. So that was the only point of them doing this, was to call Russia's bluff, which they did. Because then after this insane decision, Russia, just like China, being the same people in the room, decided, oh, well, never mind. I guess NATO, Sweden and Finland joined NATO is not that big of a deal. So they essentially backed down because they said that would be escalatory. Just the same way the United States provoked China and Taiwan with Nancy Pelosi in her visit. You see how the West is intentionally trying to provoke? And this is the policy that Bernie Sanders supports, apparently. So I want to explain that introduction so you guys will understand that there's no justification for this. The only reason to do this is if you want war with Russia. Bernie Sanders in the squad is voting for war with Russia, as far as I'm concerned.
I want to just echo that, Nick, really quickly, because it's really interesting to see, especially back when the first Gulf War and the second Gulf War were going on. The United States is very fond of the philosophy of a preemptive strike, of trying to stop a war before it begins by attacking them first, right? It's like taking the fight to them before they have a chance to even, in a fight. Before they even have a chance to warm up, you're just going to go into the locker room and start beating their ass as part of the fight you're supposed to have in a ring or something like that. It's like, that's a preemptive strike. You're attacking them when they're not ready for it as a means of defending yourself. Some people see Russia as having done the exact same thing in the Ukraine, in terms of NATO keeps we had an agreement to keep getting closer and closer to us. We're going to have to do something preemptively to keep this from happening. And what does NATO do? They double down by allowing 2 other nations into NATO. You have people like Bernie voting for it. And at the end of the day, what they're voting for, whether you want to call it a transparently aggressive or a kind of soft strategy, either way, this is another version of imperialist organizing against a specific nation, 2 specific nations, in this case, Russia and China. They don't want China and Russia to keep doing what I know that you've been tweeting about, which is to keep gaining the sympathy of the global South as the global South starts to divorce itself more and more from European American influence. So absolutely right. They keep poking the bear, and that's a pro-imperialist stance. They're almost like they want more war, because that's the only way this neoliberal failing state is going to survive.
So if your position is one of mine, and I understand NATO's role in pillaging Africa, being a structural support mechanism for old colonial powers. This was reported in the Black Agenda report. NATO and Africa, relationship of colonial violence and structural white supremacy. Even now, NATO have a memo out that their number one goal is to wage Cold War against China. How can you say NATO is a defensive alliance if NATO is offensively threatening China? So I just want you guys to understand what Bernie Sanders is voting for here. What AOC and the squad is voting for. This is by Jonathan Cook. By making China the enemy, NATO is threatening world peace. And what he's talking about here is the memo, the new strategy concept document for NATO, which outlined that they essentially want to wage Cold War against China because they feel like the rise of China is a threat to Western democracy. That is not a defensive alliance, Bernie. Bernie is joining the side of the capitalists. Remember what Lenin told you guys? how imperialism is the highest form of capitalism. You got to form these giant imperialist structures to fight against anyone who poses an alternative to capitalism. Bernie is supporting that, guys.
And
You'll
as
have no choice. Go ahead, Carlos.
No, I was just saying, and as the title of the piece says, this is a white supremacist, white settler colonialism legacy in terms of Africa in relationship to Europe and the United States. And now NATO's freaking out. And I saw the article you circulated. I don't know if you're going to go to it later on, but the idea that they're losing the hearts and minds of Africa and the EU is worried. That is fucked up, because that's a colonial, straight up, not even neo-colonial or post-colonial. That's an old school neo-colonial model of like hearts and minds as code for propaganda. It's like we're losing the propaganda pool, and it's like, yeah, no shit, because people are starving and dying of disease, and you were nowhere near trying to help that entire continent, and you get pissed off when China and Russia offer help as a means of like, well, no one's offering you help, and you want to be, you want to be allies with us, feel free to, sign the contract, and we're good to go as allies, and we're not going to wage war on each other, and we'll provide each other with whatever necessities we can trade. And that's what NATO and I think the EU and the United States in general are really concerned about.
Hearing the NATO and liberal goons, they say, well, we got to have a counter to China because China is increasing their military, and you see they're doing military operations near their own country. And guys, NATO, what the fuck do you think you are, bro? You literally a military alliance. The West literally got 800 military bases. And then they look at China. How dare China threaten its military, even though the largest military superpower that human history has ever seen has a barrel of a gun looking right at them. But then they're like, how dare they increase the military budget? These are the people that Bernie Sanders once again is listening to. And I want to talk about and I would love to get on this as well, Carlos, because it's more like philosophy, like theory, like strategy. Because the idea of Bernie and these progressive imperialists is by voting to expand NATO, by voting to expand the Capitol Police, that they somehow will get the favor of the ruling class on their side. So I'm asking you guys, and you guys can answer this in the chat, like, are you really an ally to workers? Are you really a leftist? If you are willing to sell out the global working class in order to get meager gains, and we can argue that you are not getting any meager gain for the U.S. working class. So their idea is we're going to sell out the global working class by being imperialists, by supporting NATO, in order to get meager gain for the U.S. working class, because at least the people in Washington will be more likely to go along with our agenda. Do you guys see how ridiculous it is when I say it out loud?
It's complete bullshit, because at the end of the day, what we're realizing right now, I don't know if you know that China's already imposing sanctions on some U.S. companies. Like, oh, we were going to send these supplies to build this factory, forget in relationship to what? Now that's frozen. Oh, Apple, in relationship to some of the products you get from China, we're going to freeze those. So at the end of the day, the ruling class is never harmed by any of these actions. So going back to, Bernie Sanders as a champion of the working class, Bernie knows better. If you want to make this a philosophical or politically philosophical issue, Bernie understands that we live in a globalized economy. You cannot isolate one of the major manufacturers of a lot of the tech that we use and a lot of just the basic everyday materials that we use in our lives. If you turn them over, they're made in China, they're made in some third world nation for the most part. So at the end of the day, Bernie's trying to make this argument that I'm protecting American workers, even if I'm not protecting international workers. That shit comes back. It's a domino effect. The prices will go up. Chips will not be available. Suddenly phone prices go up. People are wondering why they're utilities. All this shit is interconnected. So it's like this posturing of I'm protecting the American working class right here, even though 2 months from now, the same thing I voted for is going to come back and harm the American working class. I'm intelligent enough to know that, but I look good in the moment, which is all bullshit. You have to take a perspective on this. This is why I'm just shocked and kind of disgusted by the fact that Josh Hawley was the only guy who voted against the fucking expansion of NATO. Yes. Now I have to agree with a guy I despise and hate simply because he's the only guy that said, like, this is not a good idea. It's like, oh, great.
And I want to say this: how are we a democracy? Because I explained why I oppose NATO, And as a leftist, why you should oppose NATO? If you're a black or colonized person, you should oppose NATO because of their history as a colonial power, and they're continuing that to this day, right? So if I wanted to vote to decrease the influence of NATO, who am I voting for, Carlos? There's nobody on the ballot if I want to end the influence of NATO. What kind of democracy is this? In the United States democracy, they say you got two parties. You got war criminal number one, war criminal number two. They both capitalists. They both believe in trickle-down economics. They both like Ronald Reagan. Enjoy your democracy.
Exactly. They just have different mascots and different colored uniforms. That's the only difference, so they can play this game. Otherwise, they'd be on the same team and there'd be no competition.
The reason why I want to say this is because Josh Hawley's objection is not even a left-leaning. Listen to what Josh Hawley's saying. I think Rand Paul, and I think I gotta fact check this just to make sure I'm checked. But I think Rand Paul is saying the same thing because this is Hawley's reason for opposing the expansion of NATO. We can do more in Europe, devote more resources, more firepower, or do what we have to do to deter Asia and China. We cannot do both. That is not an anti-imperialist position, guys. He's essentially saying we need to stop supporting NATO because we need to allocate more resources to fight China and Asia. And the people are like, oh my God, Josh Hawley, Tucker Carlson, these people are so anti-imperialist. Meanwhile, they openly say, yeah, I oppose this militaristic action because I think we should have a more focus in strategic action to fight China.
And I'm almost wondering, Nick, if like Josh and other people are starting to realize, like, and I've heard other politicians come out and say this, like, we can't win a war on two fronts. We can't take Russia and China on at the same time. We're not even taking on Russia directly because I think we all understand that would not end up in a good place. And people think that Russia is invading Ukraine. They're using like, what, 15, 20% of their military capacity, if that, just simply to do what they're doing right now. This is not really a complete commitment on behalf of Russia yet. But at the end of the day, I think there's some intelligent politicians that understand, like, wow, the Democrats are really going for it. They're sending Nancy to Taiwan, and we've already provoked Russia. We cannot fight Russia and China at the same time, because if those two superpowers unify against us, we're screwed. Even with Europe's help, we're screwed. Russia just turns off the gas in the winter to Europe, and they're screwed, and that's coming. That's already been said. It's going to happen.
Yeah, we're going to talk about how Europe is losing influence in Africa, because a lot of, like, people in the global south, a lot of leftists, they're calling out this insane Cold War that does not benefit their people. Their mandate is to their people, not to the ideology of the West. Only the people who have this Western chauvinist, capitalist ideology. Like, you guys see the guilty countries, the global North, the European West, right? These are the only people that are falling for this shit. The imperial, capitalistic Japan. These are the countries that are falling for this. Meanwhile, if you look at other global leftist leaders, you realize what kind of centrist Bernie Sanders really is. And that's me being very kind. You can say he's center right because he's going for these military alliances. I'll show you guys what Lula had to say about this. This is Jeremy Corbyn. Not too long ago. Once again, Jeremy Corbyn made Bernie Sanders look like Ronald Reagan because he was smeared as an anti-Semite because he was wanted to have strong language and standing for support of Palestinian people. And that's what they also mentioned in this article where you see what it said, he would criticize over anti-Semitism because it stands on Palestine. Bro, Israel is bombing Gaza right now. They just killed 8 people, dozens more injured. Calling out Israel for being the apartheid state that they are is not anti-Semitic, also because I don't know, the Palestinian people are also Semitic people. That too. But you guys see, this is Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn urges West to stop arming Ukraine. Meanwhile, what is our farthest left senators doing? He's voting for NATO expansion, voting for more arms to Ukraine. You guys see how we have to call Bernie because he's the furthest left we get, but compared to other left leaders, compared to Jeremy Corbyn and Lula, I'm gonna show you guys the Lula quote. Here's the Lula quote. Let me pull this. This is what Lula just said, and I did a whole breakdown talking about what Lula's position on Ukraine NATO has been, and he essentially was like, Yeah, Putin shouldn't have invaded, but if you look at the whole history, this is Zelensky's war. Zelensky as responsible as Putin for this war, and then he got pushed back from the media, and he was like, he doubled down like, nah, if it wasn't for NATO expansion and wasn't for the West imperial aims, this war will never started. That's what Lula said. You guys see, once you look and pay attention to foreign policy and pay attention to what the left and other countries has to offer, you realize what shit we are really stuck with in the United States. Right? Carlos, do you want to chime in?
No, I was just going to echo those views that essentially and for people who don't know, and I'm assuming most of your audience does know, the Overton window is just a concept from sociology that measures what is considered acceptable in society at any given moment in time. And this country has moved so far right that we understand that this is part of the problem that people like Nick and sometimes myself get, that you become so critical of the Democratic Party that people assume you're some kind of Trump or a Republican. It's like, no, I know that party is kind of like, it's gone fascist. It's got a lot of racism there. It's very regressive. It wants to go backwards. The only supposed hope was the Democrats, and they're, as you rightfully said, they're moved more to the right. And we saw that with Bill Clinton. We had that conversation, which you consider the worst president, and I was like, I get the case for Obama, but Clinton started that shift, right? Clinton was like the first GOP Democrat. And in many ways, it's shifted so much that Bernie is all he's doing is adapting, it seems like, to maintain power, call himself an independent, be able to give these cool speeches on the floor of the Senate that he knows are not going to go anywhere. But it maintains, and I'm going to say this, there's a Bernie brand out there now, right? There's a Bernie brand, and Bernie represents, it's almost like Congress has accepted him. It's like, thank you for being the representative of extreme acceptable leftism in this country, because we know you won't go beyond. You'll call for a tax on the wealthy, but we just saw them compromise that out of the legislation with cinema and the new bill that's coming up. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think this new bill is for like $700 billion. It's like, oh, great. We're almost as good as Ukraine. We're almost as worthy as much money being invested in our own nation as we've invested in Ukraine already. That is essentially as much money as they're going to invest in the American people. So it's like, yeah, I don't know where the priorities are, but they seem to be more invested in foreign policy right now than in domestic policy. And that's an old school tactic. You use a war to distract people from the problems at home by calling attention to an enemy abroad. That's right out of Orwell's 1984, if not Machiavelli and other great works of political science.
I was discussing the characteristics of late stage capitalism. One, you got to build a strong police state, which they're doing right now, and then you got to build up national fury against the other. You got to find the other, which is Putin, which Bernie Sanders is more than happy to be the lapdog and push the strategy of finding the other and blame him for our problems of Putin, right? And like, if you're a leftist, you should be calling this like, it's not Putin that is the reason why we got a large prison population. Like, it's not Putin is the reason why we got a large homeless population. He's not the reason why we got civil asset forfeiture that's stealing billions from the working class. He's not like, I can go on and on with the crimes. Like, this Putin is not our enemy, but they want us to focus on that. And the jobs of Bernie Sanders has been to repeat that and be all for that. But go ahead, Carlos.
The frustrating thing about that, Nick, and I'm sure you agree with him, it's like we're not justifying some of the authoritarian things that Putin has done in the past. It's like we know what's going on there. What frustrates us is the fact that we're not willing to use that same standard of criticism against our own politicians and hold them equally accountable for the same shit they're pulling off. Everybody's talking about like, how do you pronounce WNBA Griner last name, or Griner?
I only read it. I think it's Griner. Okay. I don't know. I only read it. So.
Yeah. So I've only read it too. I haven't heard it been said.
I don't watch news. I read most of my news stuff.
So fair enough. Very smart too. But the idea is that 9.5 years for sentencing is outrageous. And it's like, yeah, no shit. But Biden and Kamala Harris are the last two people to talk about an outrageous sentencing regarding cannabis, considering their political record. And that's what people don't want to pay attention to, right? Putin's ban. And here's another example. Is like, have you seen what your president, your vice president have done historically in regards to people who have been caught with an ounce of cannabis, like they get 10, 15, 20 years. Why? Because they're slave labor. And Kamala Harris knew that, and you can profit off of that. Corporations profit off of that, and they come to your state and they create jobs, and you can campaign on the fact that you brought 10, 20,000, 30,000 jobs to some city or some bullshit like that. And no one's going to talk about that. That came at the cost of free prison labor down the street by imprisoning people because they were caught with an ounce of cannabis that they used for medical reasons.
Yeah, I can't wait till we get to that story, and we're going to talk about that later. Because if you ask me my criticisms of Russia and China, like people think I'm a Putin sympathizer. Like I keep saying over and over again, I don't care about Putin. He's anti-communist. I don't care about Putin as a leader. I do think he says a lot of truth regarding foreign policy, right? But I couldn't care less about him. And if you had, my personal criticism is, I think the censorship and the war on drugs that you see in China and Russia, I think that's unnecessary. Especially when you look at China's goal of achieving socialism and communism, I just view that as being counterproductive to that goal. So that is my criticism of them. That does not outweigh the fact that I know who my enemy is, and I'm gonna focus on the West, right? I can't influence China and Russia, but I can call out the fact that the West have no business invading and violating their sovereignty, like they do over and over again, right? So I think in those situations, the best you can do is lead by example, right? You can build a society where you have a true like liberty ideology. And I'm talking about liberty in form of high quality of life too. Like you get healthcare, housing, like real security. And then you got the freedom to smoke whatever plant you want, have sex with whoever you want, marry whoever you want. And then I think once you build a society that way, you can lead by example. And then instead of being hostile to states, you can build relations with them, and then I think you can influence their culture over a long period of time. I just think that's the theory I have. Maybe I'm too optimistic because we never seen it. Because like if you look at empires, they're always like hostile to any threat. But I think like maybe I'm being too optimistic. But I think if you had a society where we won, right, where we was in charge and we had this ideal society, I think you can lead by example and you can influence these other countries instead of having this imperialist point of view. But go ahead.
That's why mutual aid is such a threat. When people start to realize that we can take care of each other working outside of the capitalist market to access our basic needs, that shit scares the shit out of them. And general strike scares the shit out of them because at the end of the day, you showed the headlines I see you on Twitter, it's like, workers have too much power, says Bank of America CEO or whatever. It's like, yeah, you're goddamn right. They're starting to realize that. That's why they're resigning, they're quitting their jobs, because they realize like, there's a crisis of shortage, teacher shortage right now in the United States, right? Well, yeah, there's a reason for that. You haven't been paying attention to them for decades, and now they're done. They're done teaching under those conditions, and what's the U.S. going to do? Part of me thinks like this is a strategy too. This country wants an illiterate population because an illiterate population cannot be educated in the same way that one that you can give a pamphlet to can.
Well, so I want to, because a lot of people who are anti-imperialists who actually understand that we got to oppose NATO. They calling this out. They calling, and this is my tweet calling out Bernie, while I explained how, like in the 1970s, Bernie used to call for abolishing the CIA. He would speak out against Reagan ideology of waging Cold War in South America. He used to call this stuff out. Now he's an active, willing agent of this stuff. And that's why I say it's sad to see. It's like I don't like once again I worked on this campaign, but we got to install revolutionary discipline and revolutionary solidarity. This is not solidarity. This is like my title said. This is Bernie selling out the global working class, and I would argue ourselves as well. And Bernie might know that, he might not, because I make the argument that the U.S. imperialism does not benefit the U.S. working class by no means. I made that argument many times before, and I'm sticking by it, right? But even according to Bernie calculation, selling people, the global working class out is worth it in order to prove the status of the U.S. working class, which I find fundamentally disgusting, right? Now, this is Glenn Greenwald. Bernie doesn't even pretend anymore to have anything resembling a left-wing foreign policy. Like, he doesn't even pretend anymore. He's just straight up a Biden Democrat. And I'm going to show you guys some old quotes from old Bernie, the old Bernie that I missed. And I remember I told on Nick and CJ earlier this week or last week, I was talking about how, I was like, was I really wrong? Like, did I miss the mark on AOC that much, or did AOC just lie to us? Because you see her old videos and how much of a liar she turned out to be. Did she lie to us, or were we just that revolutionary and disciplined? I don't know. I think it's a mix of both.
I think they're keeping up, Nick. I think what they're doing is you're seeing politicians that want to be career politicians keeping up with this shifting Overton windows like, oh shit, if I want to stay in power, I can't say certain things anymore. I got to adjust to the new norm, the new norm, the new norm. And in politics, that new norm just keeps getting more and more extreme in favor of the wealthy. I mean, that was one of the compromises in passing this this bill they just passed with Cinema is tax breaks on corporations. That was part of like, we're not going to go as high as you wanted, and fine, we're going to. So at the end of the day, whenever concessions are made, at the end of the 11th hour regarding any huge legislation is going to take place, it's always concessions to the wealthy, and they take place behind closed doors because we're not privy to that. They don't want us to know that at the end of the day, the laws are based according to the blessings of what corporations want and don't want. Just like they are in other countries like Indonesia, where they literally sit down and help them rewrite the constitution of the country.
What's that, Carlos? And let me read the last few receipts. I'm almost an hour in. God damn. But I want to explain the whole concept. Hopefully I did a good job breaking this down, because I was playing over and over again. Almost at least a weekly stream, I explain why you cannot be a leftist and be supportive of NATO. And I hope it's clear why that cannot be the case. And why getting this wrong is such a damning thing for the I don't want to call them the left no more, but language is this, and I gotta communicate, right? They're considered the left, but they're not left. That's what Glenn Greenwald is saying. He don't have anything even resembling a left-wing foreign policy or any divergence from the neocon-driven Dem Party foreign policy dogma. Opposing NATO. Go ahead.
Danny calls it cruise missile leftism.
This is another point I wanted to explain. Bernie is joining and I think I kind of alluded to it earlier. Bernie is joining the offensive fight against the global working class, because, like, the Republicans are not even hiding their agenda because they're the one who say it out loud. The progressives are cowards. They vote for imperialism and then they don't even give you an explanation. Like, the AOC or Bernie Sanders give a press conference. They give you a tweet, anything to explain their vote. They don't owe you shit, apparently. But at least the Republicans, they will come out and say, yeah, we vote for NATO because we need to fight against China. But again, Mitch McConnell, he'll come out and say, yeah, we need to expand NATO because we need to fight Russia and China. They will come out and do a press conference and say what I say on my live stream. And then people wonder why I got this harsh criticism that Bernie Sanders is locking hands with fucking my Senator Roy Blunt, who Michael Tracy reports, he expresses joy that the admission of Sweden and Finland to NATO makes it incredibly harder for China to become an Arctic power. This is not a defensive alliance. You see how it's an offensive alliance, and they're very open about it? Bernie locked hands and joined with Roy Blunt on this. Do you guys understand? My criticism of Bernie is the same criticism I will have of a Republican. You can't pretend to be a working class champion. You can't pretend to be anti-establishment if your foreign policy is consistently mirroring Liz Cheney. Right? If your foreign policy mirrors Roy Blunt every single fucking time, if you got the same policy, the Lincoln Project, Mike Pompeo, over and over again, at what point do we say you're not a working class ally? At what point? That's my question.
And one of the things, Nick, that I think is important to call attention to, because again, it betrays that, like, the ugly underlying politics of all this, is that what we're watching with quotes like that in terms of, like, you know, allowing Sweden and Finland into NATO will allow for you know, more Arctic geopolitical security, because it's to keep China from becoming an Arctic power, whatever that means. Because Russia's already told Finland, if you join NATO, we're going to have issues with the shared waters that we have up here, because you weren't supposed to do that, and now you're doing it, so you're provoking us. At the end of the day, what I feel is these kind of moves are more to maintain what I would call, you know, quote unquote, first world European capitalist geopolitical dominance. Yes. It's not a game about protecting the United States from being invaded. It's a game about it's a chess game about maintaining pressure on your opposition by being aggressive. This is not about defense. This is about making sure that your so-called opponent or your so-called enemy, which is what we're trying to frame Russia and China as being, is and it goes back to the othering, right? We're othering Russia and China to be the perpetual enemy that's always lurking out there. It's a new Cold War, as you're stating, but they're trying to make it specifically about an ideology that China and Russia share, which we both know at the end of the day is communism. So you have a capitalist geopolitical dominance fighting against the potential for communist influence. Why? Because that communist influence is trickling down to the global south, and they're paying attention, and they're starting to make agreements and contracts saying we don't need them anymore, we can work this on our own. And it's true, we're starting to notice the effects.
This is another one. This is a famous shit-lib propagandist. You see him on MSNBC and CNN all the time. He is botted all the time. Like, all his tweets get like 40, 50,000 likes because the NATO bots always boost him. This dude this guy right here has the most unhinged tweets you will ever read. I have not. He will openly call for World War III on Twitter timeline.
I had to mute him. I didn't know who he was. This like 2 days ago. I was like, who the hell is this guy? And it's like, I don't want to read this shit.
840,000. He's, you know how everyone makes their career at a war? Like at the Iraq War, there are a lot of neocons who made their career during the Iraq War. War is a big business for people in media. This guy is becoming famous because of the Ukraine war. He's like, I remember last time I checked, he had like 500,000 followers. This war is making him so much money, man. And this dude has the most unhinged pro-war establishment tweets I've ever seen, right? Just to give you guys a heads up who he is, if you're less online than I am. And now you guys see the chief propagandist of the state, which he is, he's admitting this. Adding these two countries to NATO strengthens European contribution to the alliance, precisely what we need to shift our focus on China and Asia. This is why I can't get Bernie and the progressives. How can we get them the benefit of the doubt when these people they are openly saying it? This is the liberal too.
Now, and I want you, and I can't help myself here, Nick. Sorry, to go back to the tweet. As someone who analyzes writings and supposed to read between the lines, you look at the last word of his tweet. It's G's. This is a defensive tweet. He is responding to a criticism, right? Like, what the hell are we adding Finland and Sweden for? It's only going to provoke this.
Look what happened. Carlos, look at the full context, because I just found this quickly. He just remember Josh Hawley's his pushback. His pushback was we need to focus less on expanding NATO and focus more on fighting Asia and China. And then the liberal chimes in and said, "That's exactly what we're doing, dude."
And that's what I'm saying. It's like, Josh, shut the hell up. We got you. We're doing this in order to focus on China. And my point, and a lot of other people's point, is like, you are not ready for China. You're not even close, so don't go there. But again, these idiots are like, geez, don't you see the logic here? Once we're done with Russia, we can move on to China. It's like, done with Russia? You're nowhere near done with Russia, but go ahead and keep lying to yourselves and the rest of us.
Dude, This Exchange is actually so good for so many different reasons. That Exchange is our Overton window in a nutshell, where Josh Hawley, the Republican, is like, yo, I am the one who's got a plan to fight China. And then the opposition is like, no, I am the one who fight China. You see how there's no one that's like, hey, yo, where's the party that want peace with China? I'd rather us have a relationship, a cooperation of us working together with China and Russia and all these states to uplift the global working class. I don't know. That's just my dream, right? But both parties, like the Democrats would say, we have a more sophisticated plan to be warmongers. That's why you should vote for us. There's no better representative of the Overton window than that. Now, I want to wrap this segment up, and then we can get to we can shift to a different topic. I want to show you guys the young Bernie, the fuck the Democratic Party Bernie. I shared these quotes before, and I remember when I first saw these old quotes of Bernie Sanders, like K-Hive and a lot of Democratic Party operatives, they posted it as a gotcha to Bernie. They was like, look, Bernie's not a real Democrat, see? And then we was like, yo, these quotes are actually based as hell. But unfortunately, this guy has been gone for quite some time. So if you guys want to know how far Bernie Sanders has fallen, these are old quotes from the young Bernie Sanders, which I still maintain that in the 70s, in the early 80s, Bernie was a real left anti-imperialist fighter. And when you ask a lot of people who know him, it was around the time his time in the Congress in the 90s is where he really started to shift.
And Chris talks about that. Chris Hedges talks about like he used to be we used to be friends, and he used to be a different politician.
He was arrested protesting for the civil rights movement, especially as a black leftist. I got no complaints. Like everything up to the 90s, Bernie seems like he was on fire. But then he became friends with members of Congress. He tasted that power. Then he started voting for the Yugoslavia War, expanding NATO, right? Now, this is his old quotes. And I'm going to read some because I know it may be hard for some of you guys to see these. This is 1985. I am not, nor I have ever been, a liberal Democrat. In 2014, this is before he ran, I am not a Democrat. I despise Democrats. Here in the 1990s. Why should we work within the Democratic Party if we don't agree with anything the Democratic Party says? I don't know, Bernie. That's a great question. That we said April 1990. In an op-ed in the New York Times in 1989, he said, the Democratic Party and Republican Party are Tweedledee and Tweedledum. They both adhere to the ideology of greed and vulgarity. Yeah, man. Old Bernie need to read some books of young Bernie. In April 1990, it would be hypocritical of me to run as a Democrat because of the things I have said about the party. I agree. Once again, old Bernie was on point. Interview with Vermont Affairs Magazine in 1986. The Democratic Party is ideologically bankrupt. They have no ideology. Their ideology is opportunism.
That is right now. That quote is so perfect for right now. We should re-quote Bernie on that one alone and compare him to whatever the hell he's saying right now, because that's young Bernie going after old Bernie on precisely that. Bankrupt, and he can't defend them even though he's trying. Just want to give this sign to the peeps because I can't type for some reason any comments. So hi to those I've been saying hi. Just wanted to give a shout out. But yeah, those are great receipts because you can see the Overton window shifting little by little, and now it reminds me of the I have to abstain and I'm gonna cry on the floor of Congress moment. It's like, oh come on, that's just bullshit.
This is why I introduced that question to you guys. Was I really that wrong a few years ago, or did these people just sell out? And I ask myself that question now. I'm like, man, did I really fall for it that bad? But when I look at those quotes, if I, as someone who just become again started, it makes sense that I would fall for that, right? Because those quotes sounds good. Then he sold out. I maintain that a lot of people had their head in the right place. It just Bernie and AOC fucking misled a lot of people. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this segment, in this video, that gives me no joy to say. That's why we got called out and we got to become more revolutionary discipline. So we've seen this man shift to the right over the years, and it's just sad. It's just really sad.
And it's not easy, Nick, to go through what you went through and a lot of us go through and realize that the system is broken and it's never going to work. That is not a happy conclusion to come to. It's not going to empower you. It's like, yay, everything I believed in is bullshit and the system is supposed to provide safety and security and a safety net for it doesn't give a shit about me. That is a very depressing realization to come to. And then if people like you reassess their situation and say, well, shit, if I have no one who's going to represent me, then I go out there and represent myself and people like me by whatever means necessary.
Well said, Carlos. So I think my guest Hugh may be having some tech difficulties, but I got another story. We got plenty to discuss. So I'm going to get to this other story. It's kind of related. I'm going to show you guys this speech. You guys may have seen it. Hopefully I got the right link. Yeah, here it is. I want to show you guys this video of Putin. You would think, being the number one geopolitical enemy of the West, we would see more videos of him speaking. There's a reason why they don't do that. So to start this video, I'm gonna show this video of Putin. And let me change this. Let me change my banner. I'm gonna put liberals gaslight the working class because that's what this segment is. So that's what the liberals are doing. They are gaslighting the working class. They want us to believe that the fault and the struggles of the working class is due to the other. And I'm gonna pull up another story where there's this schism going on between Africa and Europe because Africa looking at Europe like, you guys are literally trying to bankrupt our entire fucking economy over your childish geopolitical wars. We are not going along with this. And Putin has to tell the American workers that he's not the enemy. It's the West that is driving us. But I think I prefaced this enough because I want him to speak for himself. It's a very short video. Let's play this, and this will highlight this segment pretty well. Let's go into it. Oh, sorry, I forgot. This is I'm gonna just read it out. I'm gonna have it playing on mute here because this is in Russian here. So this is what he said. This is how we're gonna do it. He said, "I want to say and emphasize that we have many supporters, including in the United States and Europe, and even more so on other continents and other countries. We about to get into that here very soon. And their numbers will only grow, no doubt about that. Because a lot of these people are starting to see Western hypocrisy and how they have the genocidal attempt of establishing full spectrum dominance that does not help the global working class out. China offering to build in other people's country and forgiving the debt of many African countries, unlike the IMF, who bankrupts countries left and right. They're realizing that this new option, instead of the unipolar world that the United States established, may be in our best interest. That is what Putin is bringing up right here. Even in countries that are still satellites to the U.S., there is a growing understanding that their ruling elites' blind obedience to the overlord usually does not coincide with and often radically contradicts their national interest. Eventually, everyone will have taken into account this growing sentiment in society. So this is Putin highlighting the fact that the Western people, the Western countries have been sold out by our elite, that our anger should be directed towards our ruling elite. And it's interesting, and this is why I told people that these liberals, they're like foxes. They're very shifty, right? So when they're under Donald Trump, they were pretending to be friends of the working class people. But now under Joe Biden, because it's super important for Joe Biden to win, they are now downplaying the effects, the economic effects and pain that the global working class is feeling because of the decisions that the global ruling class has imposed. They keep saying stuff like, and African countries are starting to realize this, and they know the global working class will realize this. They will say, well, Africa is going through this food crisis. The global working class is going through this crisis because of Putin's war. And it's not because of Putin's war. It's because of the West's economic war against Russia and China.
Right now, you'd think that the Ukraine produces the whole fucking world's food. Honestly, the way they keep framing this is like, oh my God, no one's going to eat because Odessa port right now is being shelled. And I'm like, I didn't even know we got food from the Ukraine. So this whole notion that, we are suffering because of Putin, it's like the Putin price hike. They don't even use that anymore, right? Because it didn't work. People are like, no, this is bullshit. Look at the profits that the oil corporations are making. So that's a great point in terms of how mainstream media in this country propagandizes the Russian other as being responsible for the issues we're dealing with here at home domestically. And all Putin is saying is like, you can't blame me for the fact that your leaders don't give a shit about you in your own country. Like, that's not my fault. Sorry, you got to pay closer attention.
I want to share this because this is an important development that they won't tell you in a lot of mainstream media. They keep telling you that the world is united and Ukraine struggle against Russia. They tell you this all the time. I know because I've been watching our ops, right? But this is the reality: how Ukraine may be dividing Europe and Africa. Now, when you dive into this, you see that look at this quote: many of the African Union member states do not identify an interest in taking sides in what they perceive to be an East-West conflict. So essentially what they're saying, a lot of these African countries are like, you guys want us to take a side, you guys want us to sacrifice and stand with Ukraine, even though your guys have colonial and post-colonial legacies that is not to be anything to be proud of, you guys are surely mistaken. And now a lot of African countries are realizing that they gotta have like this transactional approach with the West, which they don't feel to be mutually beneficial for the country. So we gotta support you in your geopolitical agenda in order for us to have an economic partnership. This is not how countries operate, guys. In history, this is not how it works. And now they realize. Go ahead, Carlos.
No, it's a great point. It's economic colonialism, and the West has been practicing that through the IMF and the World Bank for a long time now. And Africa and Latin American countries and some Asian countries have been subjected to that. So you're absolutely right. And this is a great. I checked that out when you sent me the link, and it makes a great argument in the sense of like, look, it speaks directly to your point. How is the EU gonna win back the hearts and minds of a continent that Belgium and France and Portugal and so many other of these same European nations colonized and were incredibly violent towards? Suddenly they're gonna come back and win back our hearts and minds. They never had our hearts and minds. In fact, they always had our suspicion and doubt, and now they want to sell us this whole Ukraine war, when in reality the other side of Russia and China, as you well established, are coming to us and saying like, we'll build stuff here and we'll help your infrastructure so long as we maintain a good, healthy, working diplomatic relationship and economic relationship. We don't need to own you. We just need to be, partners in this. And that's not the way the EU and the United States approach these countries in places like Africa and South America.
I want to, because this is what the West is really fearing. They're fearing that they're losing their influence in a lot of these countries. Because I explained in the segment I did before, when you ask a lot of these African leaders, they're like, we don't care. No, we don't care about Ukraine. We just care who want to do business in good faith in what's in the best interest of the African people. And then, especially considering the IMF has a history of bankrupting African countries, like they just did Somalia, right? They are African countries like, actually, it's in our best interest to work with China. And through their Belt and Road Initiative, China has actually forgiven a ton of debt, unlike the IMF, who constantly do these restructuring deals, which hurt the working class in Africa even more. So you have one global society, global system, right, the West, that come in like mafias, right? We're going to give you some money. If you get a little bit late, we got to charge you a shit ton of interest. We might have to reorganize your society and economy. That's what the IMF and the United States and the West has been.
They're economic hitmen. They're gangsters of capitalism. It goes back all the way to the imperialist wars of the early 20th century. They've been doing this forever. And they're using hearts and minds. That's just propaganda. It's like we're losing the hearts and minds of Africa. They say it in the article. They actually quote a European politician, and it's like, yeah, you're losing the hearts and minds because the propaganda's not working anymore. That's why you're losing them.
And you see, this is the part that scares them. You got Sergei Lavrov, who's in Africa, meeting with heads of the state to convince them that the West, not Russia, is to blame for food price spikes. And I'm going to ask you guys this question. Did Saudi Arabia, Russia, and China decide to destroy the global economy because the United States invaded Iraq? Are they deciding to destroy the global working class and starve Africa because Israel is bombing Syria? This is not rational behavior. And once when you can't rely on censorship, like you can't censor a country from talking to another country, right? Like that's what they're doing to us. They censoring the shit out of journalists. They only having one dominant narrative. You're never gonna see Noam Chomsky on CNN who began this issue, right? You're never gonna see Aaron Mate. You're never gonna see Benjamin. There's a massive amount of censorship on this issue because the West knows they are wrong. So it's very easy for Lavrov to go in Africa like, yo, do you see what these motherfuckers are doing, man? You guys see this crazy shit? And now they're preparing for this second Africa-Russian summit. was going to be devastating. That's exactly what the West has been fearing. They have sped up. They feared the rise of China, and they sped up the rise of China because of their horrific imperialist moves. Carlos, you want to chime in?
I was going to say it's the same thing that happened with the Summit of the Americas, right? You're going to eventually end up having two summits because people are not buying the U.S.-led version of what that means anymore. BRICS is an example. This the second meeting with African leaders, but on behalf of Russia, I think they're being really smart. Is the more people you alienate, those are the people we're going to go talk to and say, like, we know you just got dumped or you're getting bullied by. If you want to establish a relationship with us, it doesn't have to be this way, and you can build yourself up. Because that's the one message I think that countries like China and Russia are saying, is that we will allow you to become self-reliant and build yourself up. So you're not necessarily dependent the way that Western nations, that's the way they build relationships. It's dependent on us. You buy shit from us and only us.
Now, I'm going to get back to the segment of the establishment and the liberals gaslighting the working class because their brain works only in terms of elections. They see an election coming up and they must win by any means necessary, even if it means to tell the working class that they're struggling, that the struggle isn't real. Now, I know you guys seen a lot of this. I want to play this. There's been a concerted effort, I have noticed, of liberals coming out and saying, yo, this is the economy we have. Shit is booming, man. It's just like we got 70% of workers living paycheck to paycheck. We got millions that went homeless. We got rent that's going up, inflation that's skyrocketing. And then you got people like Paul Krugman. And I'm going to just read what he said because I got another video on play because this is what he said on CNN where he did this whole segment where he was essentially like, yeah, there's not a recession right now. And this is coordinated. Because I want to show you guys another clip. Actually, I'll play this just so you guys see what they're saying regarding how the propaganda of the liberal class, their job is to wage class war, to gaslight the working class. If you vote for Democrats and Democrats take power, they're not going to fight for the workers. They're just going to apologize for the failing of the system in a more elegant way than the Republicans can. Right? We had these giant transfers of wealth. Like you see the COVID transfer of wealth happen under Biden now, the same way the transfer of wealth in 2008, Barack Obama facilitated. They will always wage and be responsible for the transfer of wealth of the working class, right? So this is Paul Krugman. I'll play the video because I'm not gonna assume you guys all seen it. I'm gonna show you guys him gaslighting, and I'm gonna show you guys Alina Maxwell doing the same thing after that as well. So let's check this out.
A distinguished professor at the City University of New York's Graduate Center, and a longtime columnist for the New York Times. Welcome to the program. Thank you for coming on.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Can we dispense with the recession debate real quick? Are we in a recession, and does the term matter?
No, we aren't, and no, it doesn't. I mean,
one sentence. That was it, huh?
Yeah, that was it. It's none of the usual criteria that real experts use says that we're in a recession right now. And what does matter? The state of the economy is what it is. Jobs are abundant, although maybe the job market is weakening. Inflation is high, though maybe inflation is coming down. What does it matter whether you use the R word or not?
Certainly, the White House was trying to encourage reporters to use the technical definition, but certainly many are using a broader definition. So this is going to go on for a while, and I feel like everybody's playing their roles the way you would expect them to play their roles. What should the media's... Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that this is especially vitriolic. I mean, I get, I've been in this business for a couple of decades and get lots of hate mail and see stuff. I've never seen anything as bad as this. The determination of a lot of people to say it's a recession is above and beyond anything I've ever seen.
What do you think is driving that? Just partisanship and polarization getting worse and worse every year, and thus this?
Yeah, it's partisanship. People want it. It's the Biden recession. They want their Biden recession. They're going to have it. Never mind the fact that that it in fact is not a recession in any technical sense.
Is it fair to say this is the weirdest economy we've ever lived through?
You guys see the job of the liberals? Their job is whenever their boy is in charge, we're going to be all right. We're gonna be all. That's when everything's going great. The same way the Republicans do when Trump is in charge. We got a booming economy. Ignore the homeless people over there. So you guys know my stance. The capitalist metrics are a joke. What they call the Marxist position is what they call recession. What they call what they deem people being in poverty is already a joke. So what the capitalists already call a recession, if you had 2 quarters of GDP failure, right? Like if it declined, right? 2 quarters in a row. So going by their definition, we are in a recession. Going by my definition, like the working class is always in a recession. If you look at the wealth that's been stolen from us, according to capitalists, if you're a single mom with 2 kids, you make over $23,000 a year, you're out of poverty. That's insane. Their metrics is meant to be low because according to a capitalist, if you're not starving to death, if you got food above your head, you are out of poverty. We advocate for a thriving working class, which the United States have not provided. But you see, even the capitalist weak metric, the liberals have to fight against because they are here to do PR for the boy.
And at the end of the day, Nick, this just speaks again, going back to Orwell's 1984. This is doublespeak, right? We're going to change the definitions of terms because these terms are so scary and we don't need another problem because Biden's approval rating is like on the floor at this point. We're going to argue against what the language is and the definitions to the point where when you go on Wikipedia and you're an economist, a responsible one that wants to educate people on what a recession is and why we may be in one or heading towards one, they won't allow you to do that because the Wikipedia page is now frozen. It says like, please contact. And it's like, what the hell? This is supposed to be a communal area for knowledge and to educate everyone and fact check each other. And now it's closed. It's like, yeah, just.
I'm asking you guys, what is that? Like when you see Wikipedia do stuff like that, what is that? What is this established, coordinated effort to redefine a recession? Because the 2022 midterms are coming. So once again, going by my definition of recession, like, and I'm asking you guys as a tactic to decolonize your mind, right? Why are they using the metrics that they use? GDP growth, right? Like, why is that the metric they use to determine a recession? How do I skip this? When I see stuff like this, right? 58% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, right? What percentage of Americans have to live paycheck to paycheck for you to consider your economic system to be a failure? And I'm trying to see, I need to Google how many Americans, I think it was like 60% Americans that's making $30,000 or less, right? And the point being, what you guys see these random metrics they pull out of their ass? I will say if you live in paycheck to paycheck, that's a sign of a failing system anyway, right? Now, I want actually before we analyze this more, 'cause I can go on this all day. I really want to show the Zerlina Maxwell clip because now I've seen this many times, and this is the best example I have seen because I told you guys I mostly read my news. I just so happened to catch this clip, and they was talking about Democrats in elections. And in this clip, they do bring up one valid point. The fact that, like I mentioned earlier, the abortion issue may help a lot of Democrats because just like Kansas, I'm going to report on this here very soon, Kansas and the ballot initiative voted to keep abortion access. So I have a theory that I repeated many times. The Democrats was underwater so bad, the Republicans doubled down on their extremism because they have a vested interest in keeping the two-party facade up. So, but the biggest sin of this segment is Zerlina Maxwell and her guests downplaying the effects of inflation. So I'm going to play the first question, and then Zerlina later will say that it's almost a privilege to care about inflation. So there's only about 90 seconds or so. I want to show you guys what is the message that's coming from the liberal class right now. So let's watch this, and I will get your reaction to this, Carlos. 1 second.
in the culture war space on issues like LGBTQ plus rights or even abortion, how that could be a liability for Republicans. But one of the pieces of conventional wisdom I read a lot about is that inflation and the cost of things is a liability for Democrats. I mean, how do you think that balances out? Do you think that bodily autonomy in the minds of a voter who's going into that polling booth, do you think that's more top of mind than the cost of their gas?
You know, I think ultimately that in order to even have to care about inflation, you have to be alive. And if you're a woman right now who has a difficult pregnancy that's threatening your health, you know what? That's going to matter a lot more to you, I think, than inflation. You know, and furthermore, elections aren't about how you start; they're about how you close. And I said months ago, Republicans were peaking way too early. When everyone wrote Democrats off for dead, I'm like, listen, there's a lot of game left to be played here, a lot of field ahead, and Republicans every step of the way seem to be hitting that self-sabotage button. I mean, just in the last week alone, somehow they've managed.
I'm gonna let the rest of this play here real quick before I get to the part I really want to highlight. I just want to quickly point out, do you guys notice that, and this is by design, they got a black woman and an Asian man to sit here to tell you guys that things is not as bad as you guys think, that caring about inflation is some sort of privilege. I just want you guys to get that in mind, and that's a tactic that they use. I want to let it continue because, believe it or not, it gets worse.
To put themselves on the side of China, on the opposite side of veterans, two constituencies that they've really, been in their wheelhouse for years, that they've upended, and all the while they continue this extreme war on women. I mean, this is the only political party I can think of that actually uses The Handmaid's Tale as an instruction manual, and it's going to backfire big time in November.
That's a frightening thought. I definitely don't want anybody to pick up that book and use it as a to-do list. That is not a good thought, Kurt. One of the things that you said there that I really think is important is the fact that, inflation, it's almost a privilege to care about inflation as your number one issue. The same is true of gas prices, or even the idea that it's the economy stupid. I always found that analysis lacking because...
What? Hold up, I'm gonna play it one more time. You guys hear what she said? This is the reason why I pulled this clip. She said it's almost a sense of privilege you have to care about inflation. How dare you have this sense of privilege on wondering how you're gonna feed your kids? You guys see how they're trying to paint the only struggle as being the culture war, and it's a privilege to care about economic issues. This is incredible. You guys see this? I'll play it one more time, and I'll give your thanks, Carlos.
One of the things that you said there that I really think is important is the fact that, inflation, it's almost a privilege to care about inflation as your number one issue. The same is true of gas prices, or even the idea that it's the economy stupid. I always found that analysis lacking because as a Black person, I don't want to get killed on the way to my job. So I'm glad I have a job. I'm glad I make a living wage. But if I can't be alive, then what does that other stuff matter? I mean, speak to the idea that some of this stuff is existential in the minds of the Democratic base.
Before I get to his answers, and hold on, make sure, I think you're muted. Make sure you're on mute, Carlos.
No, I don't want to interrupt you. I'm just saying, what the fuck, existential?
I want to get your thoughts, Carlos, on this as well. But I want to show you guys his response because I actually didn't watch that much more of the clip because I saw that I was like, oh my Jesus fucking Christ. You guys see how they try to get liberals are here to gaslight the shit out of the working class. And you guys see how it's even more egregious where she was like, yeah, I'm happy. I make a living wage. Zerlina Maxwell, you're worth $5 million. You guys see how she's trying to pretend that she's one of us? Yeah, it's a good thing. I'm glad I make a living wage. I'm doing well. You're a millionaire for one. Secondly, she was like, well, the thing that's most important to me as a Black woman is getting to work safe. Hey, Zerlina, you want to know what's killing our people? The police.
I gotta unmute. I'm sorry, I can't help.
I know you itching to chime in. I
No, because that's a great point. I hope my sound is okay. Someone said that it sounds like I'm farting, which I'm not, people. So just know that I have a fan here because it's like 90 degrees in Minneapolis and it sucks. Anyway, the point being that that's a key moment, right? I don't want to get shot, but she doesn't clarify by who. So she's playing both sides rhetorically. I don't want to be shot by crime or the police. So in my mind, those are two important cultural issues. It's like bullshit. Crime is a consequence of a poorly organized social structure that leads people into crime, forces people into crime if they're not just like naturally gravitating. Some people do, but at the end of the day, if people are taken care of materially, usually they don't gravitate towards at least material crime in terms of theft, right? Or shooting other human beings. And she talks about it on the way to work. Why? So she's put it in the context of like, I'm going to work. I don't want to get shot on my way to work because so many people get shot on their way to work. That's the way mass shootings happen in the U.S. on freeways while people are on their way to work. We know that's not true. They happen at specific locations, like Mall of America yesterday, or Uvalde and school shootings and things of that nature. So. I just wanted to highlight that this is a great example of using identity politics and the culture wars to override class issues. They don't want to talk about class, even though they use it and they talk about the single mom. Well, the single mom gives a shit about inflation and it's not a privilege. The single mom gives a shit about gas prices and it's not a privilege. The single mom cannot afford to donate money to the Ukrainian war out of her pocket, and that's not a fucking privilege. That's a class issue. And if she's a black single mom, she's going to have an even harder time accessing some kind of security net. And that's what you should be talking about. That's what people mean by when they say it's the economy, stupid. It's not these other culture wars. It's not that they're not important, but they're always going to be connected to questions of economics and class, because at the end of the day, people are interested in surviving in order to take care of other issues, and you cannot survive if you're not eating or have adequate shelter. So it's this bullshit rhetoric of playing both sides. Oh, we want to take care of single moms, but people are focusing too much on that kind of stuff, when in reality we need to pay attention to, I don't want to get shot on my way to work. I mean, we're talking about basically that's the white female suburban defense for funding the police. And here we have a black woman on mainstream media making the same argument, parroting basically a Karen fucking argument. It is bullshit.
The gaslighting is intense because this is why we do what we do on RBN. I'm here to explain to you guys why we oppose the Democratic Party, not just because they don't do enough for us. It's because the violence they wage, the LAPD, the NYPD, these are democratic institutions ran by the Democratic Party, I mean. Right? Minnesota, Baltimore Police Department. These are democratic operations that wage violence against our communities. It's Joe Biden that spans DHS. Right?
New York City, your favorite mayor.
And you guys see Zerlina's job is to be the black woman to give credibility to the Democratic Party. That's why I told you guys, when you see a black person on MSNBC or CNN, these are the most dangerous class traders that you will ever see. Well, I would say class warriors because they're fighting on behalf of the class. Say that instead. They are the most brutal class warriors on behalf of the rich. Now, just to give you guys a little background to Zelina Maxwell, like she was obviously a big Hillary Clinton stan, but I don't know if you guys remember this. But this is the MSNBC clip where this guest, she said that Bernie Sanders make her skin crawl. I guess I'll play the audio. I just Googled it just to find it real quick. And you see Zelina is there too. And Zelina was one of those people that was pushing the Bernie bro narrative, that was smearing all Bernie Sanders supporters as sexist, right? And I want you guys to see this unhinged quick clip. And this is who Zelina pals around with. Check this out.
Somewhat moderate Democrat. Bernie Sanders makes my skin crawl, and I can't even identify for you what exactly it is, but I see him as sort of a not pro-woman candidate. And so having the two of them there, like, I don't understand young women who support him, and I'm hoping that.
You guys see that? Not a long clip, but you guys see that's Zelina Maxwell, just not long. She's always been extremely class loyal to the ruling class. So let's watch the clip. I want you to play that part one more time, and then I'm gonna play the answer of the Asian guest, whose job is also to be the age representation that is supposed to make the Democratic Party look good to it. You guys see the setup of this interview? They're two class loyal minorities that fight on behalf of the ruling class that's supposed to be our representation. So let's play it one more time. Let's get our final thoughts, and then I think I got one more topic before we wrap up. So hopefully you're doing well on time. Let's play this part one more time.
About Kurt, one of the things that you said there that I really think is important is the fact that, you know, inflation, it's almost a privilege to care about inflation as your number one issue. The same is true of gas prices, or even the idea that it's the economy stupid. I always found that analysis lacking, because as a Black person, I don't want to get killed on the way to my job. So I'm glad I have a job. I'm glad I make a living wage. But if I can't be alive, then what does that other stuff matter? I mean, speak to the idea that some of this stuff is existential in the minds of the Democratic base in a way that it's maybe not for the middle of the country, the so-called middle, or even more conservative-leaning voters.
Yeah, listen, if you just lost your house because of a flood in Kentucky, if you just lost your livelihood because it burnt down in a wildfire, if you just lost your life because you are the wrong color and you were pulled over somewhere, inflation doesn't really matter to you or to your loved ones. There are much broader things going on right now in this country that affect so many demographics, that the dollars to cents case that has been made time and again about, you know, like I said, it's the economy stupid. There's a blind spot there, and you'll notice that the majority of people who make that statement are generally white.
Sorry, I'm done. What? Let me. You guys see the class loyalty on that they show here, that they want to shoo away kitchen and table issues, despite being 13% of the population. Black people are 40% of the homeless population. Despite being, we have the most medical debt. What do you guys think is harming our communities the most, other than state violence, which your party supports? You got state violence, you got an economic war. And then she's trying to pretend like, well, if you lose your home due to a flood, well, how is that bad? But lose your home because you can't afford rent? That's okay? Carlos, do you want to chime in? I feel like I know you chime in a bit.
Well, I just can't believe the contradictions that they engage in. And they literally are talking to an audience that I feel they have no respect for intellectually. They know they're just they're talking to a herd that's ready to just follow whatever they say. So two things that struck me. She makes a living wage, right? Fuck you do. I want to make that living wage. Whatever you make living wage.
She tried gaslight the viewers to think that she's like her. And then even the idea that she's in danger. She got a security detail.
Exactly. So the fact that she talks about an existential threat. Look, Black people need to worry about our lives because we're being killed. It's like, no one's arguing against that. But if that's the case, then why do you keep funding the fucking police that are killing you?
Yes.
Why don't you redistribute those billions of dollars into community safety programs that will help those people that usually get killed and have that existential threat? Because I thought you actually live it, but I understand what you're talking about. And the police are not the solution to that existential threat. They are the cause. They are the reason Black and brown bodies walk around feeling like their lives are always under threat by some kind of law enforcement. So at the end of the day, they're arguing against themselves, and they don't realize it, because all they want to say is like, don't worry about money and your material conditions of how you survive on a daily basis by eating and finding shelter. Worry about these other big issues that might impact your life, like, you know, being shot by the police. And it's like, don't you see the fucking connection? Police get funding. Give us that funding so we can have better lives, so we don't have to worry about some of this other shit that you say is a privilege, like gas prices and rent and food. It's just, it's such a weak argument that it's kind of hard to sit through because it's complete bullshit.
Yeah, so you guys see the sacrifice I make for you guys to make a good segment. So I think we said everything we need. So the reason I want to do this segment, because I want you guys to know this rhetoric is going to escalate. as the economy is going to continue to get worse. I don't give a fuck about these capitalists, man. I don't care if they say we're in a recession, we're not in recession. I know class war when I see it. Whether they say we're in a recession or not, the working class is being squeezed out by the billionaire class, regardless, right? But so we need to explore the rhetoric and need to know what's coming so we can counter this, right? So because just like the Trump cultists would apologize for Trump economy, make up a lot of bullshit as people are struggling, the liberals, Blue MAGA, will do the same exact thing. That's why I want to show you guys that clip. Now, there's one more story I want to do, and then I guess I'll be back. I guess I'll try to come back tomorrow to do the rest of the stories. So I do one more story because I definitely want to cover this. We're gonna cover the Brittany Griner and Russia situation. Let me pull this up. Here's the background of the story. I saw this today, and you have Russia wanting to discuss a prisoner swap because they had Brittany Griner, who was arrested because she had, what was it, marijuana vape cartridges? Yeah, vape cartridge. And I think she was sentenced for like, how long was she sentenced? I'm trying to find it.
9.5.
Yeah, I wanted to say 9.5. And so she was sentenced to 9.5 years. And this is the most recent story I saw. This was printed today, where Russia wanted to discuss a partner swap. So this is the update to that story. And I do want to start the story by saying this. And I mentioned this earlier before. This story is exactly why I told people I don't care about the Russian state. I'm not a Putin apologist. Anyone who believes I am. It's ridiculous because my arguments was never a shining endorsement of Russia as a country. I do bring up the fact that their workers have health care. I do bring up the fact that they got paid maternity leave.
Free education.
I do mention the perks they get as a working class, just to show you guys how unhinged our society is. That Russia was like, yeah, I think these things are good things to have, right? And I'm not saying Russia's bad, but I don't take the side of states. I know who I oppose. I know who my enemy. My enemy is the unipolar Western hegemony that has colonized African, Black, colonized people and waged class war against working class people. That's why I root against them. Now, when it comes to China and Russia, especially when it comes to like China lifting people out of poverty and what they've done to the working class, I think that's amazing. And I think the U.S. capitalist class is trying to wage war against China because they view them as a threat. But at the same time, I'm not a big fan of the censorship stuff. Oh, I see we got Q here. I see we got Q. I want to introduce. I see you there. Give me a thumbs up whenever you're ready. I just now saw you there. So if I had one criticism, I would say I don't think that's necessary to achieve the global prosperity of the working class that you think. So actually, I want to get Q in here. I know we run out of time. I definitely want to get Q in here. So we kind of interrupting the story. I want to introduce my brother Q, Anthony Amene. Thank you for joining us. I'm glad he was able to make it. How you doing, brother?
Yeah. Anytime. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. I actually want to backtrack because I definitely want to get your thoughts on a few things because we don't. How you doing on time, Carlos? Because I want to talk to Q about a few things. Definitely for sure. We didn't get to Brittany. We talking about that right now. So I guess I ask you about this because I'm gonna get into some things that I always call out hypocrisy. You see liberals and conservatives melting down over the Brittany Griner case, which I don't agree with. Now I don't think that any state should be going after people over plans. But I find it hilarious that Jim Crow Joe and Kamala Harris of all people is trying to call out the evil Russia, even though they're waging a drug war. But just to get started off, since we was talking about this already, Q, do you have any initial thoughts about the Brittany Griner Russia thing? Have you been following that much?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I just like I have a hard time. I saw a story of a black man out in LA that got a life sentence for something like 4 grams of weed, right? And then Joe Biden has the nerve to talk about how this is egregious, is excessive, it's unfair. We had a brother just passed away, a former Black Panther just passed away.
Yes.
That had 43 years in solitary confinement. 43. Imagine being in a 6-foot by 9-foot cell for 43 years in solitary confinement. Like
that story is painful to read.
That's actual torture, bro. That's humans are not meant to spend that long by themselves. Okay, he spent 43 years in prison, passed away just yesterday. Oh, sorry, 2 days ago. So the idea that any American out there is talking about how authoritarian or egregious, how much of a travesty of justice it is, like turn around and look at yourselves, man. Get out of here.
This is exactly why I actually like to look overseas, because this country exposed itself. Because when you see how liberals talk about other countries, right? Like you see how liberals talk about how China cracks down on the freedom of the press. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's great. I would love if you kept the same energy for the West and how it treats Julian Assange. Now you got liberals and you got Democrats who all of a sudden drug war advocates, right? They're anti-drug war advocates, but they've been silent when, or they want to vote for the party that is putting up the two biggest drug warriors. I have seen, look, this is the tweet from Kamala. I want to show you guys. This is Kamala Harris. I had to say this tweet because this is what she said. She said, with today's sentencing, Russia continues its wrongful detention of Brittany Griner. She should be released immediately. This is coming from Kamala Harris, the top cop, and obviously
of all people. Do you know how Kamala Harris got to be how Kamala Harris got to be San Francisco DA in the first place?
Go ahead, show the story.
She I forget the name of her predecessor, but her predecessor as DA was actually planning on decriminalizing. Like, he was not going to prosecute cases for marijuana possession, distribution, etc. And Kamala ran on a law and order campaign to upset him. So she was able to successfully primary him, and she went in the complete opposite direction. So they were on a path to decriminalization, or effective decriminalization. That is, that they were not going to prosecute these cases. And Kamala Harris was like, nope, we're about to lock these ninjas up. And she did. She locked up literally thousands of people on marijuana charges. And then, of course, we're very familiar with the fact that, as Attorney General, she pushed forward a policy to lock up the parents of truant children. And, during the primaries, people were saying, well, no actual parents got locked up. That is not true. Parents did actually get locked up because of the children's truancy. So for Kamala Harris, of all people, to talk about this being excessive or that Brittany Griner needs to be freed, well, what about all the people that she locked up? Is she ready to submit pardons for their sentences? Is she ready to apologize for locking all those people up and ruining those families? I don't know, man. The hypocrisy is too much for me. Like, it's not as if I have any I don't have any animosity towards Brittany Griner. I don't think that she deserves 9 years in prison for some weed in a vape pen either. But hearing that from American political figures, especially political figures that were themselves responsible for some of the worst carceral policies that we've seen in our lifetimes, it's too much coming from them. Until they're ready to pardon every single person locked up behind their policies, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, that's why with Carlos, I'll pass right to you, Carlos, but that's why I explained earlier that I disagree with a lot of with some of these steps that Russia takes, but I think the best thing that you can do, if you actually care about that, is to lead by example. And our country is in no position, especially with our history. Like, we in prison. I got to pull this up because Lori, what's that blonde Barbie conservative? What's her name? Lauren something. I don't know. This Republican person, she was like, well, if you got criticisms of the United States, look at how they are treating Brittany Griner right now. I'm like, we in prison 1/4 of the world's prison population.
That's what I wanted to say, Nick, is that just speak to the point that Q was making, is that's another thing that Americans are extremely propagandized, is like, oh, this is just a classic example of why China and Russia are police states, right? And it's like, compare prison populations, and you'll get a great immediate clue as to what nation in the world is the leading police state that incarcerates the most of its citizens. I mean, China and Russia aren't even close to us.
Yeah, and not even close. Here it is, Tommy Loren. Tommy Loren, that's the name of the person that I was thinking about. Here's the tweet. I had to dig for it. Hopefully we get Q back. I think he told me he was traveling. Hopefully we get him back in. But this is Tommy Loren. Brittany Griner is a cautionary tale. Hate America? Think it's oppressive? Go to another country. Play stupid games and find out what oppression and no justice looks like. This is coming from conservatives that believe in tough law and order criminal justice systems. And that's why I just explained right below. And I say this before, I don't think this is necessary. as a country to impose these restrictions. That's just my personal opinion, but I can't hold them accountable. What I can do is hold our country accountable. That's my role as a U.S. citizen, right? And it's my role to bring up the fact that we imprison 1/4 of the world's prison population. You can't say you believe in freedom. You can't claim you have a "don't tread on me" ideology like a lot of right wingers do if you support this state that's locking up people over a fucking plan, right? So that's what I had to keep bringing up to these people, especially on the light of this story, right? With them, and here's another story. And despite Kamala Harris and Joe Biden promising to decriminalize marijuana, you have this. This was written last month, and people just keep ignoring this because I don't know, it's not a priority to them. I guess they know it will only impact Black families, poor workers. Why the hell isn't Biden ending the war on cannabis as right now?
In fact, I think arrests on for pot have gone up under Biden's administration at the federal level. So
I think so too.
Yeah, people are going back to prison for fucking pot when it was about to end, and they're, states are passing and trying to legalize it, and people are calling for a federal legalization. There's that one candidate right now, I forget what African country he's running, but he's basically running on legalizing pot, and he's upending the elections. We could do that as a country really easily, since so many states are already on board. But yeah, he's not going to follow through with any of the promises that he made, from community college to stimulus to, lessening charges against people who are prosecuted. Because I think that was part of the campaign promise, if I remember correctly. Not necessarily legalizing it, but less charges for people on minor drug offenses. But yeah, you got 2 ex-cops basically in charge right now, so they're not going to go for it. In fact, they're back to law and order.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I want to ask you for a few more things, but maybe we have to reschedule for a longer conversation with Q. I definitely want to ask her about Nancy Pelosi in Taiwan. I want to cover that at least a little bit. Hopefully, I get him back in here. So I was saving that for when Q was in the house. But I want to just read the reaction of China. And let me say this to start the segment off. I had a prediction that China was bluffing, and I told you guys why China was bluffing. When you're a state that's protecting your sovereignty, the only thing you really can do is boast, bluster, in order to prevent a psychopathic imperialist country from violating their sovereignty. We see this over and over again. You see this with Iran. You see this with Russia. We see this with China now. The West purposely crossed red lines, and then when the opposing state react, they say, "Oh my God, the imperialist warmongering China, the imperialist warmongering Russia get involved in a conflict that we started in 2014." You see how they probe, they escalate, and then they attack the opposing side as the people who are unhinged. And the people who watch nothing but mainstream media and the people who don't question their government, they see us as the good guy, and they see Putin and Xi in China as the bad guy, even though they're essentially reacting to the provocations of NATO. Just like, as I predicted, Russia, they caved regarding NATO. Let me see if I find the. Here it is. Here's the initial warning I reported on. When there was warnings that it was happening, right? You guys see the date here? God damn, New York Post got a horrific website. Here it is. You guys see April 14th. I covered this, and I told you guys this probably was a bluff. It said Russia warns Finland and Sweden against joining NATO, raises nuclear threat. And you gotta notice they didn't use any nukes. When they actually changed their tune because they were like, "Holy shit, the West is crazy." They were willing to end everything just to make us look soft in order to call our bluffs. And they did. They called us bluff. The same way that US called China bluff. And I say that with a question mark. Because China is not impulsive. China has a long-term plan for the global work class. So my initial response, and it seems the U.S. called China's bluff, but did they really? What are they planning? I have this as an update. China says ending cooperation with U.S. on multiple issues. And this is an unbelievable amount of restraint on China's behalf. As I said before, I praise the restraint of countries like Iran and China. When you look at what the United States have done to them, the escalations, the insults, China's pretty much saying, you're done. We're cutting you off. And they're pretty much going to start working with the U.S. on climate change, which is not good. China has reduced its population. Sorry, reduced population. They reduced their pollution in the last 7 years more than the United States have done. I'm trying to remember the exact stat. Let's see if I can pull it up. It's insane. Like, they actually been taking it seriously. Let's see, China. I gotta Google it. China pollution. Let's see if I can find it. Damn, I'm kicking myself for forgetting the exact stat. But my point is, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Nick. I was just gonna say, as you're talking, I just want to bring up one minor example of what you're talking about in terms of how they prep us for this kind of stuff with this kind of rhetoric, as a country, as citizens. They're doing the same thing right now with Latin America. Ted Cruz just gave a talk, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, talking about like they're not going to tolerate Marxist, socialist nations in Latin America, and if they do go that way, that the United States is basically going to intervene. And so at the end of the day, they're being very honest about the fact that they're looking around the world and starting to understand that the BRICS, Global South, China, Russia alliance is starting to take place, and they're warning the Southern Hemisphere of the Americas, saying, if you guys go socialist, the United States will pay you a visit. And Ted Cruz was very open about saying that, and he used the word Marxist. So if you go Marxist or socialist, you will deal with the United States.
So let me let's read this and go through China's response here. Q said his phone overheated. He may join us in like 10 minutes or so. I may just reschedule it. We see. But I want to go through this story. I want to get a take on Taiwan. I know you really, especially the China issue, he's really good on. China on Friday said it was canceling several defense meetings and suspending climate talks with the United States after a visit by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan this week. They talk about the climate talks, but I'm trying to find the full list, because that's just one of the things that they was talking about. Like they are completely cutting off the West from a ton of financial.
They stopped building a factory that was going to create batteries for Tesla and other ones here in the United States. So China's starting to say, like, we're not going to do that. And they already told, like I told you, Apple with the iPhones is like, yep, you're going to have a hard time with that. And so basically they're letting the United States know, and Europe, like, all this shit that we make that you depend on, like, it might start get sanctioned, or you might have to pay more for it.
I found the stat I was looking for, at least. This is what I meant to say. I couldn't remember the receipt on top of my head. But this is what I was talking about. China reduced air pollution in 7 years as much as the U.S. did in 3 decades. Just to show you guys who the serious people in the room regarding climate change has been. But yeah, we're gonna see, because the China already announced a lot of long-term planning. Like, they're not like the United States, where they get a slight and they're going to start dropping bombs. They're not as dumb as the U.S. So we see. They announced a lot of financial policy, just like the one you mentioned as well. A lot of things are going to be shut down, and we're going to be hurt by it. I don't think it's going to be the ruling class that's going to be hurt by it. I think the global working class is hurt by the United States, like, completely deciding to go full heel against Russia. That's just my take.
And I'm wondering, Nick, if China is essentially going to end up becoming the superpower that the rest of the world is going to look like as a role model, whereas the United States becomes more like the militarized police state. China, and this is one thing that we could debate at some other time, or not debate, actually, just discuss. It seems to me that China has a vision for its nation. It has a vision for its hemisphere. It has a vision that's based on lifting up and improving their society. Whereas in the United States, because of our two-party system and the corporate influence, we don't have that vision. Every time there's a new fucking presidential campaign, there's a whole new vision being introduced. This one's Build Back Better. I don't know. I don't think that's going very well just based on what I'm witnessing. But every time I look at some of the projects that China's engaged in, they seem to have a very long-term vision that they are actually materially realizing that it's becoming a reality with every passing year, just like they're tackling climate change, whereas this country simply talks about things like that but never takes the necessary action, because at the end of the day we have to negotiate that with Wall Street and corporations, and that's where the vision gets completely twisted.
Also, I want to share the video from Mick Wallace. I think he's a member of European Parliament. Just like Claire Daly, he's one of the people that you see in Europe that constantly calling out the hypocrisy of the West. And he's one of the people that calling out NATO in the West for their hostile position on China. If your position is you want global prosperity for the working class, the global war, waging a war against China is the most counterproductive thing you can do. You can tell the U.S. is doing what it's doing because they want blind, full spectrum dominance. They don't care the cost of that, right? They don't care how hypocritical they sound when they discuss this issue. And this is what Mick Wallace discussed. And you guys see the title of this stream. Once again, Bernie Sanders. I wish we had Bernie Sanders that was on the Senate floor saying this stuff. I wish that I could do a stream where I'm like, man, look at what Bernie killing it. I wish I could do that. But instead, I gotta look overseas and find a European leftist for you guys. So let's watch this clip, and I'm gonna show you guys just how behind the ball Bernie is compared to other leftists. And the thing is, I don't know this dude even consider himself a leftist. I just constantly see him speaking out against U.S. imperialism, which is apparently too much for Bernie Sanders, that is. So let me get into this video. Sorry, let me fix the audio. I'll get it right.
Our Irish comrades.
In relation to security, you say that they're a security risk to the people of Europe. I don't really see the evidence of that myself. And do you accept the fact that the Americans last year spent $800 billion on defense? It was more than the next 9 countries put together, including Russia and China. Now, you say that China is substantially building up its military forces. Well, most independent observers would see it as being more defensive than offensive. What would be your comment on that? And the last one, values. Now, I raised this with the SecGen of the EEAS yesterday, and when I challenged him on this notion that there's a battle to be fought over values, he said, so when speaking of China, so it is a model. Then we can decide whether we want to live in that model or in our model. That if we want to continue living in our model, then we have to stand up to the challenge that China is posing for us at this stage. Do you not think that we can actually have our values, our model, and they can have theirs? China is a very established culture, and they mightn't do things like we do them, and we don't do things like they do them. I mean, do you not see a prospect where we actually can live in peace?
Before we get into that guy's unhinged answer, because I'm gonna show you guys this answer, just show you guys how unhinged the ideology of NATO in the West is. But you guys see how he even had to talk to these people like they're fucking kids. You guys know that he was like, you know, if you got a country, we do things differently than they do. So how about the fact that they do stuff differently than we do? That's not a good reason for us to fight them. You know how the same way a parent got to lecture their kid, you don't hit your sibling because your sibling has something that you want. No hitting, Josh. The same way that you had to lecture a kid, Mick Wallace had to lecture global leaders on how peace works.
Right.
Go ahead,
You have two nations that, or two, say in this case, two, I guess he's talking about nations, China and the EU or whatever. But the point is that he's saying, like, look, they have their own model that they're following, and the word that he didn't say, but it's almost in the background, it's like they're a civilized nation with culture and a long history, and they do things differently. Maybe on some things they do some things similarly, but at the end of the day, it's like, what's the motivation for going and, as to use your example, what's the motivation for going and punching them in the face? Why do we need to go and intervene? Why do we need to go there and upend their model of how they're building their nation and taking care of the region when there's no need for it? Why can't we just have a peaceful relationship with China? What's the need for the aggression? And you're absolutely right. He's just posing. I liked it. I guess I felt like a kid at that moment, because it's like, this is one of the clearest explanations, or at least clearest questionings of why can't we just have peace with that nation? What is the motivation for us going to war? And that's where you get the unhinged shit about China's dominance and global aspiration.
If only we had Bernie Sanders saying stuff like that. This is very rational. Then I'm going to show you guys, now I'm going to go back to the video, because I'm going to show you guys his unhinged response. And he was making nothing but great points. And the point I made earlier in the stream, that NATO, by their own stated mandate, is not a defensive alliance. It has never been a defensive alliance, ever. The same mandate they had to oppose the Soviet Union, it continues to this day, opposing China, opposing Russia now. So I'm going to rewind it just a little bit so you guys can hear Mick Wallace speak fire, and then I'm going to get to that guy's response. Because his response is insane. Insane. I don't want to spoil it any more than that. So I'm going to play the video because it's not too long, and I want you guys to hear Mick Wallace again. So let's go. Let's start from the beginning.
In relation to security, you say that they're a security risk to the people of Europe. I don't really see the evidence of that myself. And do you accept the fact that the Americans last year spent $800 billion on defense? It was more than the next 9 countries put together, including Russia and China. Now, you say that China is substantially building up its military forces. Well, most independent observers would see it as being more defensive than offensive. What would be your comment on that? And the last one, values. Now, I raised this with the Sec-Gen of the EEAS yesterday, and when I challenged him on this notion that there's a battle to be fought over values, he said, so when speaking of China, so it is a model. Then we can decide whether we want to live in that model or in our model. That if we want to continue living in our model, then we have to stand up to the challenge that China is posing for us at this stage. Do you not think that we can actually have our values, our model, and they can have theirs? China is a very established culture, and they mightn't do things like we do them, and we don't do things like they do them. I mean, do you not see a prospect where we actually can live in peace?
Then Mike Wallace, China. Well, and then China is defensive. Well, why do they then invest so heavily in new long-range nuclear weapons? Why do they actually deploy all these new submarines? And why do they behave the way they behave, for instance, in the South in the South China Sea? And then, well, of course, I respect that China is a different country than Europe or Norway or the other countries in this room. But for me, some human rights values are universal. The freedom of speech is not something we just have in the Western part of the world. It's something we believe that every human being has the right to do. So we then crack down on free press, arrest journalists, writers, those who disagree. That's fundamentally violating values we all believe in.
These people are insane, and they are liars of the highest order and degree, right? So once again, Mick Wallace, talking to him like a fucking child that he is, he said, hey, we have different values. The US have values. China has values. How about we respect each other and form peace? And he's like, nah, fuck that shit. If you don't believe what I believe, we're going to die. He literally heard what he said, and then his response was like, nah, fuck that. We're going to impose our dominance over them. For they got human rights violations. Like, look at, we in Florida right now, Ron DeSantis banned protesting. And fuck your verdict. I know what you guys want to say. Well, technically, you can protest over there. A protest where you got a permission slip from the government is a prep rally. What Ron DeSantis did is ban protesting. He essentially made it so you got to beg the government to show dissent. Then you got us cracking down on Julian Assange, us cracking down on BDS protesters. I can go on and on over how we violate the free speech of our own citizens. So you guys see how he openly, from one, hypocritical, and two, he doesn't even address what Mick Wallace is saying. Like, you can't impose your belief on other. And his response is, yeah, we can. Carlos, you want to chime in?
This is just classic Cold War rhetoric in terms of they are the evil empire and we're the good guys. I mean, this is what Reagan sounded like, basically, back in the day. He used to use Star Wars analogies and like, we are the evil empire versus like the rebel alliance.
Oh my God!
We need to use the force.
Audio issues killing me again.
Like that. They literally have to rely on absurd, irrational when compared to Wallace's speech, which is very rational. It's like, look, this is them, this is us. There are differences, but they're not major. There's no reason why we can't be friends. Why can't we be friends? And I love your summary. It's like, fuck that, and that's it. You can just period. It ends there. What follows are just a bunch of rationalizations, but at the end of the day, it's just a big fuck that. Because if we're friends with them, then we have to sit down at the table as equals, and we're not dominant. And that's what's at stake here. It's European dominance versus the emergence of those that were left behind, which is essentially what people call the global South, or third world nations that are going to be led by these two nations that did what Cuba did. Is that they're making it work. And I saw it in the comments. These are examples of political economic models that don't necessarily have to depend strictly on capitalism. They can diversify. They can be flexible in terms of what that economy looks like and means, so that it can benefit the population entirely and not just one person. Anyway.
Yeah. Well said, Carlos. Can you hear us? How
yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
All right, glad to have you back. So hopefully you're doing well, Carlos. We go a little bit long. There's a few things I definitely want to ask you about, especially real quick. We can always reorganize a long conversation. But what we're just talking about right now is the whole China thing. And I know you discuss China all the time, so I would love to get your take on like the U.S. Especially like I'll start with the Nancy Pelosi trip, the Taiwan trip. The U.S. I'm gonna start there because we were talking about China as a whole. So instead of getting you sped up to speed, let's start there. Like, what your take on the Nancy Pelosi trip to?
For what? For like, okay. The thing that kills me about the United States is that like it has a peculiar habit, and like proponents of the United States have this peculiar habit of accusing other countries, other states of, especially like their rivals, of doing exactly what it is that they themselves are doing. So I've seen, I can't even tell you how many tweets talking about how China wants to expand its sphere of influence, that it wants to take over the world, that it wants to mold the world in its own image, that it's trying to entrap other countries in through debt trap diplomacy. And it's just like, so you're just basically telling your people that China wants to do what it is that you're already doing or have done. It's kind of mind-blowing to see how like Brigitte Markison, who is like the EU's envoy to Africa, has literally talked about creating a transactional relationship between African states and EU countries as far as foreign aid goes, saying that, well, if they're not willing to take our position on Ukraine, if they're not willing to oppose Russia, then we may have to essentially consider how much aid we're giving them. And it's like, your countries exist because they've extracted so much from African states throughout history. You owe them. The fact that Mali has all of the gold in the world, and they don't have gold reserves, but France has no gold, yet they have gold reserves. They basically steal Mali's gold, and up until very recently, we're in control of how they use it. It's just completely mind-blowing that people would talk about like how cotton production in Xinjiang is made with slave labor. Just like, but the United States built its entire modern industrial economy off of slave labor and off the cotton and indigo trades. Most of the cotton that's harvested in Xinjiang is done so with machines. It's like it's almost like they excise their own demons by projecting exactly what they've either done or are doing onto other countries. So Nancy Pelosi going to Taiwan, first of all, the United States officially, in an official sense, actually agrees with one China policy. Like its official policy is that Taiwan is part of the is part of the People's Republic of China. So this idea that Nancy Pelosi is going over there to support Taiwanese freedom, when most Taiwanese people themselves believe that they are part of the Chinese mainland, they may have differences as to how they're governed, but there is no widespread popular support in Taiwan for a complete separation from the Chinese state. So to go over there and provoke an international incident at the very same time that her husband was under fire for possibly insider trading, especially with regard to the U.S. agreement on semiconductors that they've just reached with Taiwan, that the United States has, like, for the past, I would say, like, decade and a half, called Chinese laborers exploited laborers. Why? Well, because the goods that people buy in the United States, especially like with iPhones and other handheld electronics, were made by factories, which, by the way, are located in Taiwan. People are talking about these factories that have suicide nets. Well, first of all, you're buying the electronics, like you're buying the finished products, you're buying those consumer goods. You shipped your entire industrial sector off to south of the border or across the ocean, and now you're mad at them for making the products that you demand in the first place, and you can't even get the countries right. You're blaming China, for example, for suicides at Foxconn when it was a Taiwanese company in the first place. So how are you talking about this is like the bastion of freedom in East Asia, and yet you're deploring the conditions under which their workers labor? Chinese laborers don't experience those kinds of economic conditions. The last time you could probably point to horrendously exploitative labor conditions that did require international attention was the Black Kiln factory. And what happened? Well, people were arrested and executed as a result of that. Do you think that the United States arrests or executes CEOs of companies that exploit their labor or exploit workers' labor, that put workers under dangerous conditions? Do they arrest billionaires? Do they just disappear? No. Like this whole thing is an absolute farce. And the idea that there's Americans that are on board with this, they're talking about, they talk about if China invades Taiwan, then this is a red line in the sand. Or even I was watching a clip from CNBC that when China shot a missile over Taiwan, they said that the Chinese are they're stamping their feet, they're throwing a temper tantrum. But how the fuck do you think the United States would respond? Excuse me for swearing. How would the United States respond if some Chinese dignitaries landed in, I don't know, and this is, by the way, not a perfect analogy. It's going to break down for several reasons. But imagine that they landed in Hawaii or Puerto Rico to say, no, we believe in Hawaiian freedom and Taiwanese freedom. So a high-ranking member of the Chinese Assembly landed in one of these states or territories. They landed in Alaska or something, and said, why would the United States feel that they have a right to sovereignty on your territory? No. You are your own independent territory. How would the U.S. respond to that? Are you kidding me? So I don't know. This entire thing is a farce, and everybody that's going along with it, just they sound so stupid to me.
And Q, imagine that with also a military escort, because Nancy Pelosi basically arrived, if I'm not mistaken.
Was it 90 million?
Yeah, it cost $90 million because she had a military escort because she wanted to make a show of it. And you're right, it was provocative, but it's very interesting when you hear Blinken, I think, talk about, it's like, no, we honor the one China policy. We honor the one China policy. It's like, oh, what a contradiction. You got a politician who's undermining it at the same time that you're on the podium saying, no, we don't want to fuck with China on that term.
Yeah, if you guys heard her speak too, when she was speaking, it was directly contradicting that. She was saying we support Taiwanese right to self-determination. And it's that's not the policy of the United States, you insane, mentally broken hag. And the world is a worse place now because of what they did.
Way to, by the way, of all people to send over to Taiwan, I mean, way to convince the rest of the world that the United States is not run by lizard people. Why the I don't say it.
Dude, I wish I had some videos saying
if you were going to try and send anybody to beat the lizard people allegations, why would you send Nancy Pelosi?
And then she gives a great speech where it's breaking down towards the end. It's like, I can only imagine what the translators are saying. It's like, I don't know how to translate this nonsense at this point. It's like, yeah, freedom, you, us, ice cream, let's get out of here. And it's like, and it's the same thing. And just to your point, Nick, Russia has backed out of the International Space Station, and the people that work up there are saying like, "Fuck, that was the last working healthy relationship we had with Russia was the space station, and now Russia's going to build their own, probably in conjunction with China, I would assume, in a few years."
Yeah, man, people need to be outraged because the actions of our stupid, ridiculous leaders have consequences. I'm gonna read this list, and I just saw Caitlin Johnstone. She mentioned, and she's on point here when she said this, like we in the worst spot as a global working class because of Nancy Pelosi's stunt. The stunt that they were open. This is for her legacy. That's why she wanted to be the first Speaker of the House since Newt Gingrich in the 90s to visit Taiwan. That's why that you want to completely throw apart global peace and stability, which they already and it was just another excuse for them.
No, they don't want global peace and stability because right now the United States has nothing left to export besides financier capitalism and war. That's it. There is nothing else the United States has left to export.
It has to be war. It's going to be a perpetual war. Yeah, this is basically a version of and this is why, in terms of propaganda, Marvel released a whole fucking Infinity War franchise because they were prepping audiences. Like, there are wars that just have to keep going, even if it's in different universes and different timelines. It's like, all right, I guess war never ends.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I explained many times that we don't have a social contract. Like, we're barely a country. We are arms dealer. The United States is literally
that's exactly what I'm saying. The United States has nothing left but financialization. Now, keep in mind, like the Chinese banking sector, it's so funny too. I was talking to a friend that was saying that there was a possibility because of this. What was it? The new Hainan Fortune Group. This company that was apparently like scamming people out of their deposits and promising larger deposit interest than other banks were capable of. And I'm like, this is the second time in a year that I've seen people in the United States speculate that some individual company is going to be able to collapse the Chinese, the Chinese financial system. The Chinese financial system is like $395 trillion large. It is huge. They're not only able to finance their own growth and development, they're able to finance the growth and the development of several other states at the same time. So this idea that like that the U.S. is going to be able to, I don't know, like retake its #1 spot through financialization and the export of arms and war, like this is a losing proposition. The position that the United States has taken, I'm talking about when I say position, I mean like position in financial terms, like the position that the U.S. has, like the stake that it has in global growth, development, and trade, is the same position that just about every other decadent empire has had before it falls. Now, do I think that like the U.S. is going to steadily collapse in our lifetime? I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying that, but there is no strength that they have left aside from bellicosity, from belligerence. That's all they have. They don't have a strong manufacturing and industrial sector. They've already strip mined all of their natural resources down to the bare earth. They now have to rely on other countries exporting their goods. The biggest problem that the United States has right now, and this is why they find China so dangerous, Russia was sort of like a foothold into animosity with China. The reason that they find China so dangerous is because of the Belt and Road Initiative. This idea that other countries would be able to fully industrialize themselves to be able to not only extract goods out of the ground, but be able to manufacture finished products, which requires a level of industrialization that the West has never allowed the global South to achieve in their history since the Columbian contact. The process of industrialization is going to cause spikes in carbon emissions. That is absolutely true. But the problem is the US and these other countries have basically called an end to the whole game. They basically said, okay, listen, like we've developed ourselves to a level where we are now a post-industrial consumer economy. We basically rely on service and real estate. We're good. So we're gonna call it off here. Carbon emissions, we're just gonna cap that. You should not be developing yourselves. You should not allow other countries to finance you into developing yourselves into industrialization and subsequently post-industrialization. So any country that is giving you the benefit or giving you the ability to determine your own fates, aside from just giving us what we want out of the earth that belongs to you, we're going to call them enemies. And the Chinese strategy here is to create a localized yet global path to development and trade. What the Belt and Road Initiative is, as people from the West often call it debt trap diplomacy. No, it's actually something way more dangerous than that to the West. What it is is think about like Nigeria, for example, right? And I would say like West and Central Africa generally, right? So look at the amount of track and road that Nigeria is laying down. So there was a road from Abuja to Kaduna that was incredibly dangerous for people to drive through. Now they're building a railroad to connect the capital city to a smaller city in Nigeria that is highly traveled, but people are afraid to travel it by road because they could be waylaid by terrorists, bandits, whatever. Being able to hop onto a commuter rail line to travel between the two cities is actually going to save a hell of a lot of lives. That is being financed not only with Chinese money, but right now, at least, it's being constructed with, for the most part, steel and concrete from China. Now, why on earth would Nigeria need to import steel from anywhere? Why would they need to import concrete from China? Ethiopia, Eritrea have deposits that are capable of supplying the rest of the African continent with all the concrete they need. Guess what's happening right now? They're building concrete plants and they're building railroads in Ethiopia and Eritrea so that any other country that is looking to rapidly industrialize can buy from a trading partner that is on their own continent. That is the entire reason why the African Union passed that free trade agreement a couple of years ago. It came into effect January of 2021 so that they can help each other industrialize. And much of this is being financed, is being bankrolled by Chinese, not just the Chinese, but also being bankrolled by Indian Exim Bank. So having these countries rapidly industrialize so that they're not simply serfs that dig up goods out of the ground and then give them at a huge discount to Western countries, but they pull the goods out of the ground, create finished products on their own rather than shipping them all the way across the world for them to be manufactured into finished products and then re-import them at a premium, buying their own goods back. So if they want to, let's say, develop like solar and wind and hydrogen energy and so on, they can do it themselves rather than waiting for countries in the West to build it for them with their own natural products and then they buy it back at a premium. That represents a huge danger to the West because a globalized system, or at least a globally interconnected system, where each country is able to determine its own fate, able to build their own social and political structure, able to manage their own economies, and set their own terms with how they trade with the West, that is actually what's dangerous. And that's why they're pulling all of these stunts to make China and Russia look like the global aggressors, because it deflects from the fact that they have benefited from the slave labor and from the natural goods on the African continent and from Latin America for decades, well over a century, ever since the scramble for Africa, ever since the Monroe Doctrine. This is how the United States, this is how the UK, how France, and the rest of these Western countries, I'm going to try and avoid as many slurs as possible on your show. This is how these countries have been able to benefit and industrialize themselves. And the idea that any of these people that they've seen as lesser, that they've seen as primitive, that they've seen as not contributing to Western civilization, these unwashed hordes, now that they actually are controlling their own destiny, this is the biggest threat to them. And that's why you're seeing them pull these stupid and ridiculous stunts for publicity, because they've got nothing left.
Yeah. And just to speak to Q's point, this is why the United States encourages instability around the world. This is why the United States will manufacture crises, because the only thing we have to sell is security, because we are, as you said, a weapons dealer. And what China is selling is exactly that, self-reliance. We are trying to help you become self-reliant economically so you're not codependent on European nations or the United States, which you have traditionally been indoctrinated into believing that you are perpetually, with these debts, with these loans, etc., and the fact that you are always a constantly developing nation. China and Russia's model, especially China's, like, we can help you become self-reliant so that you can develop on your own terms by yourself, on your own cultural terms, and we're not going to dictate to you, let alone destabilize you in order for us to come and rescue you, which is the U.S. model. We destabilize, then we come in and rescue.
Yeah, the Chinese envoy to the Horn of Africa, Zhui Bing, said less than 2 months ago, he said China is not interested in selling arms. China is not interested in selling conflict. China wants to export scholarship and education is what it wants to do. And frankly, like, that's what they have been doing. When they talk about things like debt trap diplomacy, ask yourself how many countries on the African continent have gone in receivership to China and had goods seized from them, had parastatal entities or public entities seized from them. What happens when they can't meet their debt obligations, especially during COVID? They were refinanced. What happens when African countries could not meet their debt obligations under the IMF It was basically just a fire sale. So give me a break. Like this, I don't know. It's just really funny. My mother and my sisters were in Europe recently, and they came back, and I had a conversation with my mother, and just turning on the news and listening to it, she's like, I can't believe people are just so stupid that they listen to this stuff and actually believe it. And she says, like, maybe one of the problems is that people are so monolingual, and monolingual, speaking only one language encourages you to like lock yourself into a single mindset, not to open yourself up to other people's. If you speak a different language, you're by nature bringing in other people's mindsets. Like the nuances in language come from certain different mindsets and other cultures and so on. And because people just are so heavily assimilationist in the West, especially in the United States, Canada, etc., people will lock themselves into monolingual culture. It's also monolingual thinking. And the idea that anybody could sit down, turn on their television, watch CNN, and see Nancy Pelosi, having this, like, I don't even know what the hell to call it. I don't know if it was a summit or a conference or whatever. But just to watch her pulling this publicity stunt and think that this was an actual good idea, I'm sorry, but you have to be one of the dumbest people alive to look at that and see it as anything other than a flailing empire trying to hang on to itself or hang on to power by a fingernail.
Yeah, and
Did
this
you
is
see Rokana and the people that were defending it? And look, that's why I show you guys the propaganda that come from CNN and MSNBC every once in a while. So once you guys get a dose of left education on the channel, you guys can see what the unhinged people on MSNBC and CNN are also saying. And Carl, I know you want to chime in. Go ahead, Carlos.
I was just going to say, to Q's point, that's an excellent insight in terms of how culture influences people's thinking. Frantz Fanon writes a lot about that, how culture influences your perception of the world and what reality is, and that has everything to do with language, and languages, cultures are built and founded on different languages. And the US is extremely hegemonic, English only type of nation, and it not only makes us, and I checked out your webpage and I really like the quote you have there regarding literacy, because essentially what monolingualism does is limit our capacity for literacy, cultural literacy, if you will. And more importantly, it makes us ideologically illiterate as a nation. We are not introduced to other ideas from other cultures that see a way of achieving similar goals, like surviving as a human being on the planet, differently, in a way that is friendlier.
You're in academia. Isn't that by design? Because our revolutionary blackout sister Josana, she speaks 4 languages. And I speak one because I'm a victim of U.S. public education.
Yeah, you're.
So I hear you guys. I'm like, man.
There's ways to. You can fix that. You can fix that. I mean, I speak English. I speak French. Against my will, but I speak French. Yo hablo español as well. Like I speak Spanish passably. And I'm learning Arabic and I'm learning Chinese. And the reason for this is because I want to be like, it's not enough for me to read the translations. It's bad enough the fact that, like, if you wanted to get a video of Putin's full speeches, you will never be able to find it because it's not broadcast, because in the West we censor information. The information that we're presented with is not the full picture. It never is, and people are simply too intellectually incurious. Like, it's funny, we call it censorship. It's not exactly censorship, because if you know where to look, you could actually find Putin's full speeches, you can find Xi Jinping's full speeches. Is that people are just intellectually disinterested in looking. It's like Kwame Ture said, they don't have to burn books in America. All they got to do is put them in a library where nobody will read it, right? But if you speak different languages, like, it's going to encourage you to want to look at the sources. If you can understand Russian, you will want to listen to Vladimir Putin's speeches. Doesn't mean that you have to necessarily agree with them, but it at least means that you're getting the full, like, you're getting his perspective on why the conflict with Ukraine was necessary. You don't have to agree with anything or everything that Xi Jinping says, but you can at least get a Chinese perspective. You can at least begin to understand the differences in cultural thinking. And because Westerners believe that their civilization is superior, that there is nothing else to be considered, you'll hear people talk about, like, Euripides and Aristotle, etc. You hear them talk about St. Augustine of Hippo, but you're not going to hear them quote from Arabic scholars and poets or from Chinese historians. You're not going to hear any of that because they don't have, there's such a deep-rooted cultural chauvinism that they want a globally interconnected planet, but they want that interconnected planet to bow to Western assimilationism. They don't believe that there's anything to be learned from any other culture. That's why we find ourselves in constant conflict with these other cultures, because nobody wants to adopt our way of life.
Yeah.
It fucking sucks.
It has to be multicultural diversity under capitalist neoliberal terms. And if it doesn't fit that model, then it is less than civilized. And can you imagine, just speak to that point, if people did speak other languages or were encouraged to learn other worker solidarity? I mean, they don't want that for a reason.
Dude, I would be out of here if I can speak. I remember I was trying to learn Portuguese because I wanted to train jiu-jitsu and capoeira. I wanted to train in Brazil because we got good train. Like, dude, you get
train capoeira. Don't train jiu-jitsu. The capoeira, you'll find the quilombos. You know, they're cool, but the BJJ people, they're fascists. So I don't even know about all that.
I learned that Gracie. I learned the Gracie support Bolsonaro, and that broke my heart. Like,
oh, bro, the Gracie family. Check this out. Did you know the Gracie family actually has ties to the Confederates in the U.S.?
Come on, bro. Don't break my. Come on.
I'm not even joking, bro. I'm not even joking.
Man. You better make me stop saying jiu-jitsu. I'm gonna put the samba at this point.
No, the Gracie family, their ancestors were actually some of the original Confederates.
God damn it! I should have stayed there.
Yeah. It's funny. There was actually there was a banking family. One branch of the family ended up in the banking sector in New York, and another member, like a cousin, ended up in the banking sector. I forget their names off the top of my head. Ended up in the banking sector in Brazil, and they both had the exact same fascist mentality, and that strain of racist, like that ethnically chauvinist fascism, because you know that Brazil was like one of the most it was an apartheid nation, right?
Always light skinned. There was that light skinned Brazilian too. So
I mean, it's not just that, but like Brazil was like one of the world's major slave economies, and it is and has been even though it has the largest membership of the African diaspora outside of Africa, it's just an incredibly racist country, and that's because there's a strain of fascism that's been exported from Europe that sees Africans as underdeveloped minds, not capable of making their own decisions. And yeah, those ideas propagated not only in Brazil, but in the U.S., partially due to the efforts of the Gracie family's ancestors.
I remember Josana Brazilian, our RBN sister, and I told her I wanted to train jiu-jitsu in Brazil, and she had the same reaction you did. She's like, no. The Gracies here are fascists. Yeah. I'm like, and I'm learning about Brazil. I know a lot more about Brazilian politics.
And your boy was a capoeirista back in the day. You didn't know that, did you?
Who? You?
Me. Yeah.
I think I heard it before, baby.
Yeah, when I lived in West Palm Beach and Pompano Beach, Florida, I used to train with Quilombo de Queimado.
That's nice as hell. I love capoeira.
Yeah.
I know I do a little bit of the moves, but I can't do like the crazy flips. I could. I got
pictures, bro. I got footage. I got pictures.
We gotta train one day, man. We gotta train one day.
Yeah, absolutely.
I did because we had Brazil Academy here. We got a lot of Brazil. We got a large Brazilian community in Kansas City, a larger than national average by a significant amount. And they got this community. They literally had a gym. They call it Brazil Academy. I used to train up there with all of these old school Brazilians. That's why I used to be interested in learning Portuguese. And I remember I was learning Spanish for a bit because I dated this girl for like 2 years, and then she was trying to teach me to speak Mexican. And then we broke up, and then I had like a salty breakup. So I was like, fuck that shit. I was all down like, I'm gonna be, and I still know, like, I can understand Spanish.
My man didn't say, hey, fuck this girl. He said, no, fuck the whole Spanish language.
Yeah, fuck
the entire Southern Hemisphere.
I was young. It was a salty ass breakup. I was literally learning her language. That's how much I was into her. It was a salty breakup. So I was like, I don't even want to learn this shit no more. I shouldn't have stopped. Because I do want to become multilingual. Mostly because I'm not in love with this soil. People are like, you want to leave America? If you hate America so much to leave, I'm like, motherfucker, I wish I can speak the language of the countries I want to go. That's a big barrier. But anyway, I want to ask you one more thing because Sabby actually going to be live here soon. I can't go over her time. We was talking about the Ukraine conflict. I want to get your take on this as well, Q. Especially how, like, this war is not going out the way the West expected. Like, I don't know, the U.S. expected, like, Africa and all the other countries.
I actually think I think it's very much going the way the U.S. expected, which was like, coercing the EU into cutting their own throats.
Add more to that. I would love to hear it.
Well, because Germany operating on 40% energy capacity right now, Holland like putting pressure on its farmers to both like meet the agricultural export needs of the rest of the EU while at the same time having to lower their carbon emissions, having to lower their nitrogen output that's ending up in like rivers and streams and causing algae blooms and so on. That's why the Dutch farmers were up in revolt. And a lot of people like were saying that the Dutch farmers are like their landlords and that they're, you know, that they're not actual workers and so on. And frankly, like I'm not even really interested in all that. But like look what's happening with the EU right now is that they are under a hell of a lot of pressure. This is going to be really shit winter for them because their staple crops are not their staple needs are not being met, which they would normally depend on imports from Ukraine and elsewhere in Eastern Europe. And then they depend on natural gas and oil from Russia. Well, they're not able to get either. And so the partners that they need to be able to make up the shortfall are not going to be able to deliver on that. Like where is Germany going to get enough energy to power itself through this upcoming winter? Where's that going to happen? I don't know if they thought that this conflict was going to be over like hasta pronto, like, you know, the Ukrainians with, you know, supplied by arms from NATO countries are going to be able to repel the Russian barbarian invaders.
Do you think they're shocked? Do you think they're shocked by the response they get in Africa and some of these other countries?
I think that they play like they are, but they absolutely should not be. No, they shouldn't be, right? Because what, like in what period of history have African nations ever sided with the West against Russia as a bloc? Normally they try to stay out of it. So I mean, maybe during like the neo-colonial period, you might have had like nominal statements in favor of like NATO allied countries, but we don't live in that world anymore. So no, I don't know that if they're acting like they're shocked, I don't know why they would be.
So
and the idea that like African nations are going to like they're going to do the exact same thing as the EU and cut their own throats by coming out against Russia. Okay, look at it this way. I don't know if you saw what happened with Haiti and Venezuela a while back. How like Venezuela had this oil subsidy program where they would provide oil at a dirt cheap rate and also provide low interest and sometimes even no interest loans to African nations. They actually restarted that program, I think it was earlier this year. And Haiti, under recently assassinated Jovenel Moise, they declared Juan Guaido the rightful president of Venezuela. And you know what happened as a result? Haiti got cut off from that oil and financing subsidy from Venezuela. Ended up cutting their own throat. Did the United States come to their rescue under Trump? No, didn't fucking happen. So I don't know how I don't know how they would be surprised. Any country that was paying attention to how Haiti basically just like committed economic suicide, and that's why they were having all those revolts over gas prices earlier in the year, is because they were not getting subsidized oil and gas from Venezuela. That's why energy prices were going up so high. That's why they had those riots, yada yada yada. So any African state looking at what happened in Haiti, why would they risk the exact same thing happening to them by making a declarative statement against Russia? So no, they shouldn't be surprised.
So there was two lines of thoughts that I had when I've been reporting on this, and I can see the merits in both. I honestly can see the merits in both. There's the argument that the West, they thought they can win this economic war. There are a lot of morons who thought they could, and they made a bad calculation. And then there's what it seems like what you're proposing. Make sure I got this right. It seemed like a controlled demolition. Like the West knew this was going to happen, and they've been preparing for the new world order. Is that more like? Because I do debate this. Like, did they tank all this shit on purpose, or did they know it was going to happen? It seems like you're more on the side that it was controlled demolition. Is that right?
The World Economic Forum's Great Reset paper. Just read the paper. You know, read about the Great Reset. Read about everything they were planning. Because I know people say that this stuff is conspiracy theory, but they wrote it down in books.
Exactly.
They told you what they were going to do.
That's
so
exactly
no,
true.
like, yeah.
When you quote them back to themselves, it's a conspiracy, right? It's like when you show them, it's like, but you have a plan here. You want to destabilize Europe economically through this war with Ukraine so they become more U.S. dependent in some way. And at the end of the day, you're right. I mean, Germany's opening coal plants in anticipation for the winter because they know they don't have that
They don't have the ability to meet their own energy needs.
Exactly.
Yeah. And nobody's going to provide it for them.
And the U.S. knew that could happen. They knew it was a possibility. So what happens? I think the U.S. thinks that Europe is going to become U.S. dependent.
Well said. I want to get to the super chat, and we actually got to get out here because I don't want to overlap with Savage Stream. This is a good way to end it. Thank you for $10. This is the first time I heard from Q Anthony, and man, he's very informative. Just want to read more and more of his writing. I want to say that now because now there's a great chance for you to plug. That's a great transition. So,
I got nothing to plug right now. I spent the summer basically being a trad dad, right? So I was just doing a whole lot of household projects, got back into woodworking. I was just being dad, like a suburban dad. I do have to get.
We got a call-in show with Glenn, don't you? You still doing that?
I do, yeah. I have the call-in show with Glenn Greenwald, Unredacted, which you can hear on callin.com. We usually announce it. It's usually Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. And then we have the Culture Stream, which is Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Taking a short break, but we'll be back in full force by Labor Day. But yeah, like right now I wasn't ready to plug anything because we are taking like a bit of a, I don't know, like I wouldn't want to say hiatus. We're just like on a much lighter schedule now. Yeah. And plus, I haven't actually written anything for a couple of months now. Yeah, I was taking the summer off, and now, like come Labor Day, I'll be back at it, and you'll see more material from me. So look out for the Substack, look out for the streams, look out for the call-in show.
Yeah, I need to release more on my Substack, but between doing this show and then call-in, it's hard to. I need to get back on my new stuff. We also got to get you back up so we have a long conversation. We got to get out here though very soon. Carlos, anything else?
Man, you can have me on whenever. Like, I know sometimes I'm hard to get a hold of, but I know I can't be hard to get a hold of. But you can have me on whenever, bro. Just let me know when.
Yeah, we gotta have a longer discussion here very soon. Especially if there's so much fucking shit going on. So
Carlos, we should have a martial arts discussion among the three of us since we're all.
Yeah. Artists too. So yeah, we got it.
Hey, wait! Don't promise me these things, because Carl Za a while back was saying that we have to have a stream together about like Hong Kong cinema, because that was listen, Hong Kong cinema was my jam in the 80s and the 90s. Your boy was heavy into the martial arts flicks. Right?
I grew up on Jackie Chan movies, bro. I love all that shit.
Bro, you don't know about me and the Three Dragons, okay? Me and Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung, and Yuan Biao, okay? He was like this, okay? We came together like Voltron back in the day.
I said on the stream before, I told the story. I remember when I was a kid, I used to want to be part of the Jackie Chan stunt team. Like, I never cared about being famous. Like, I literally never cared about that. But I saw Jackie Chan stunt team, and I was like, bro, that shit was dope as fuck.
Bro, I used to go to anime conventions dressed like Eddie Gordo, okay? I was I'm telling you, I was heavy in these streets. Carlos, listen, man, we just met for the first time. I'm down for that conversation whenever you want.
Oh, absolutely. I'm down, because I think there's a lot of correlations in terms of how one thinks when they're fighting in relationship to politics. And I think if people just understood, like, you need to understand what you're doing in the moment, and after a while it's going beyond your fucking opponent. It's going to like enacting what you want to do rather than just reacting to what they're doing. And there's a lot of
that's the thing. That's actually why I've had a hard time sort of like writing and doing stuff lately, and I've had to like go back to stuff that's like fulfilling and meditative, working out. So I train in Muay Thai. So hitting the heavy bag. Huh? Oh, you do too, eh?
Yeah, I'm a second-degree purple.
Oh, no way. Sweat up.
Yeah.
But doing these things that are just like sort of like personally fulfilling and meditative to me, like I've had to go back and do that, because sometimes you find yourself in like the constant like cycle of hearing news and then reacting. And I think like we're just not meant to have this many reactions and this many takes to this many things at the same time. You really got to like narrow down and find your focus on what particular things interest you, and then try to like look ahead. And it's just like you're saying, Carlos, it's like the whole strike through the target, or like control the opponents, or control the ring. Like you can't always be reacting to what is happening around you. Like all of these, I know I joke about being on social media way too much, but like one of the reasons that I'll take like days off of it is because I'll just take some time and either read theory or read news that actually interests me and formulate a proper analysis to that. Because if you're constantly reacting to everything around you, there's no way you could form a coherent analysis of anything.
Absolutely. And Nick, I know we got to get off, but just to speak to that point, we're falling for too many feints if we were fighters right now as a population, as working class citizens. We're falling we're falling for the feints, and we're overreacting to the fakes, and we're not paying attention to what's really a potential threat versus what is just a feint, what is just a fake out. But it's just meant to look like a threat so that something else can come in around it and actually cause damage.
Yeah, we gotta definitely have a conversation, especially we gotta talk about how capoeira was a martial art that came from resistance, as a slave.
Yeah.
Slavery.
Came from slavery, bro. They fought men on horseback with guns with capoeira. All right, it would take more than. It would oftentimes take more than one. Oftentimes more than one soldier to take down one capoeirista. Yeah. Imagine that, unarmed.
And my favorite thing is that they could hide it as cultural, spiritual practice, when in reality it was martial fucking arts training.
I said it many times. I believe that left needed to train martial arts.
Absolutely.
I think everyone needs to train martial arts, and I'm like, we need to have martial art mutual aid where we teach people martial arts around here. A lot of people don't have access to it.
Absolutely.
That's a serious. That's a serious thing. We're gonna bring to light with our RBN chapter.
Oh man, bro, we all have to learn trades. Like we have to learn how to be able to sustain ourselves, right? Yeah. Even things like, I've been going around my house repairing bits of furniture, and I'm also like repairing furniture for other people, because I'm like, stop getting into this whole IKEA-ification of life, where you buy something cheap, it falls apart, and then you replace it. Like, get furniture that lasts, and if something happens to it, then you repair it. You don't just throw it out and replace it. That's what they want you to do. This whole like planned obsolescence economy that we work on, this blank as a service that you're constantly paying for things. That's what they want you to do, because there's this overproduction of goods. They don't want people to have things that last, neither physically nor intellectually or even culturally. They don't want anything to last. Everything has to be replaced every 5 seconds. And that's like, so we have to learn useful trades. I'm big into woodworking. I'm slowly getting into metalworking. But even learning things like, carpentry, electrical, or whatever, like, it goes so far to be able to become self-sustaining. And we also have to learn, like, learn like health and fitness and martial arts. Like, you have to learn self-defense. There should not be any, you don't even have to be fully able-bodied to be able to practice martial arts.
Killing it in just
yeah. But the left should be putting a focus on self-defense, whether it's like armed self-defense or unarmed self-defense. Like, we should all know how to defend ourselves. I was actually reading and I know you got to go, and I'll make this quick. I was reading a tweet thread by somebody in Toronto the other day. Her cousin was, I guess, like walking down the street, and somebody was following behind him and shouting homophobic slurs, and then the person attacked him, and he called emergency services. So he called 911, and fire showed up to see how injured he was and have the paramedics treat his injuries. But he asked, are the police coming? And they said, no, the police aren't coming. They decided that they're not going to take this call. He was just violently attacked, and the police were like, yeah, no, we're not going to deal with that. But keep in mind, like, the pigs in Toronto allowed Bruce Arthur, a serial killer, to operate in the village for years, and people in the gay community in the village in Toronto were saying, our friends are disappearing. There's got to be something going on. We believe that there is a serial killer at work. And Toronto police said, stop scaring people, stop overblowing it. Turns out there actually was a serial killer operating in the village, and the police knew who he was and did absolutely nothing about it. So I'm like, these people have no interest in protecting you whatsoever. Listen, you got to learn self-defense, because if somebody's following behind you and shouting homophobic slurs, deliver the fate. I'm sorry, you just got to defend yourself. If somebody's shouting homophobic slurs, they're going to escalate to violence, and they're already using emotional violence against you. If you're responsible with physical violence, hey, that's on them. Maybe they should have just shut the fuck up and minded their business.
I strongly agree. We really got to continue this conversation pretty soon, like probably next week or so. Cause we got to have like a left conversation about martial arts. I really believe, and you can't rely on this state. And I literally just released a video a few weeks ago, where I was imploring, I was telling Black people and trans people in particular, do not listen to these liberals who try to disarm us. If you're a trans person right now, with the rise of anti-trans hate crimes, why would you disarm right now? That doesn't make sense. But knowing that the police are not interested in protecting you, knowing that people are looking to attack, find yourself down at the range and just make sure precision and accuracy. Okay, 2 things that you gotta have: precision and accuracy.
Absolutely. And for people in the chat, if martial arts builds confidence and it makes you less shy about engaging in confrontational situations through self-defense. You're not going to be a bully, but you'll feel more confident once that confrontation emerges. You won't shy away from it. You won't panic about it. You're familiar with it, and that's one of the most important.
And the thing is too, when you have like enough confidence, like when you know you can defend yourself, the thing is you don't even times
you can avoid.
You don't even have to respond with anything, because people can just get, maybe I should. People can just get the vibe off you. Maybe I should just not push this any farther.
Because you're comfortable with discomfort, and people can almost sense that. It's like, I'm comfortable being uncomfortable. I'm comfortable with pain. Are you?
Yeah.
And suddenly you find out that they're not. That transphobic person is not. Who's chasing you or following you, they're not that comfortable with discomfort.
Yeah.
Trust me, guys. I got some stories regarding that. Trust me, guys. Like,
hey, bro,
you
listen.
know how to
I have seen because like the academy that I first trained at, right? They started in Thailand, and I'm telling you, I mean, they had like trans women in Thailand that were training. They will beat the brakes off of some transphobe over here, bro.
Beat your ass, like.
Oh, that JD Pond feminism. That's something else.
Bro, and I swear, we can talk about this all day. And I'm loving this conversation. We literally got to do this here. So I actually got to go because Savvy got go on live here.
Yeah, man.
So we definitely got to do this again. Make sure you guys check out the next stream. We got more content for you guys. Always got great content. Savvy will be live here at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Appreciate you guys for watching. Make sure you guys subscribe, hit the like button, support us on Patreon if you want some more content like this. And we definitely be back. Like I'm thinking here very soon, guys. So
all right, man.
I'll reach out and we'll be into contact. But thank you guys for watching. This is Social MMA. This Revolutionary Blackout.